to burn our country because a guy drug overdosed on the streets of Minneapolis. And the
oh my God,
that's true. He did drug overdose.
It's factually not the case. This is just, it's a racist lie. The autopsy from the coroner said that it was a result of asphyxiation that he died.
Not just my opinion. Just read the medical examiner report.
Cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement subdual, restraint, and neck compression. He's just lying now. Completely lying.
Of a single Christian country that you would say mistreats women, right?
America.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yes.
We had a female woman vice president.
Fucking terrible argument.
Vice president, a female speaker of the House.
Oh my God.
Earn more than men
Wow.
in America.
What?
In
No.
Rwanda.
What the fuck? It's ridiculous to say that just because, oh my God, racism is done because we had Obama. Charlie, are you fucking serious? Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. If you're watching this video and you are a returning viewer, thank you so much. If you're coming over from Instagram or TikTok, thank you so much for the support there. If you haven't seen my Instagram and TikTok, perhaps you've just stumbled upon this video or the algorithm has recommended it to you. Thank you so much. This is going to be a reaction video to Charlie Kirk's latest humiliation that he underwent at Cambridge University at their free speech union. So I'm looking forward to going into that and seeing some of those reactions. I guess just to be upfront, this is mainly a blind reaction, at least in its whole, in its entirety. I will say there obviously have been some clips that have been going viral of various debaters ripping Charlie to shreds because he is completely out of his depth when he's debating not random American college kids that he pulls off the sidewalk. But so those have been pretty interesting. And they've been fun to watch, to say the least. But I have not watched it in its entirety, and I certainly have not meticulously prepared rebuttals and things like that. So I will, kind of be pausing the video as we go along, talking about my thoughts on things, how I might respond to something of this nature. But from my understanding and the clips that I've seen, it's going to be an interesting video. So definitely stick around for that. I'll have chapter markers, I forgot the word, like what are the chapter markers in the description that should show up in this video so that you can skip around if you'd like. I'll try to maybe do it by speakers because I know there's multiple students. Maybe I'll do it like that. I'm not even sure because I don't exactly know how the video is structured, but something like that so you can stick around. Of course, you can also just skip to the start of the video if you don't want to hear me rambling, but a few things before we start. You'll probably notice this, not great background behind me. That is largely just because I moved back from college, recently graduated, and my room behind me is a bit of a disaster. So decided to spare all of you that, seeing that behind me. However, in exchange for that, you're going to see little aliasing around my hair where it tries to carve me out. So don't look at that too much, and hopefully it won't annoy you. I don't know where this is. Certainly not my house. Very beautiful house, though. So props to whoever's house this is. Trying to think what else. Some upcoming things that you should be on the lookout for is I will actually be participating in another Jubilee video. I can't disclose what it's about, but I'll be going out to film that ever so soon. So it should be fun. I'm really looking forward to it, and you will obviously know when that is out. Of course, Jubilee, my previous appearance was kind of how this all mainly got started. So I look forward to going back there, participating in that, and I think it's going to be a great time. So trying to think what else. I don't think I have anything directly. Thank you so much for tuning into this. And without further ado, let's drag my face down and let's get to watching. I'm going to have my face be a little bit bigger for this video. And the reason is because my Opus Clip, which is the AI software I use to edit my clips, when it crops in on my face and my face is too small, the quality really suffers. So I'm gonna have it be a little bigger. I know that comes at the cost of me covering up the speakers or the content. I don't think it is as much. I was looking through, but I'll try to move that down a little bit. But I think for the most part, it should not be a big deal, especially because you mostly need to hear them, and I'm not cutting off any of their faces. So should be good. Let's make sure this is all set. I will give this a play, and we should get right into it. So here we go. There we go. Good.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. Our speaker tonight is Charlie Kirk, a prominent conservative commentator. He's founder and CEO of Turning Point USA, which has a presence on over 3,000 high school and college campuses. It is the largest and fastest growing youth activist organization in USA, and he's written 4 books. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Brilliant. So I'll start with some questions from me, and then we're going to move to the questions from the audience, from the people who've submitted them, and who'll be asking them at the dispatch box. My first question is about Turning Point USA's Professor Watch List. Its mission is described as exposing college professors who discriminate against conservative students and advance leftist propaganda in the classroom, with examples including feminism, abortion, and socialism. How would you respond to critics, such as PEN America, who see it as supporting what it claims to deride, which is the intimidation and ostracization of those who express controversial views on campus?
Well, we're getting right into it, aren't we? Thank you. So just by background, Turning Point USA has now grown to be the largest campus conservative organization in the country.
Answer the question.
I come from a view that conservatism is widely underrepresented in American campuses. And by conservatism, I literally mean the defense of Western values, free markets, rule of law, individual initiative, entrepreneurship, the Constitution, so on and so forth. And in American college campuses in particular, and I don't know, I'm guessing that this campus is, I don't even want to guess. We'll see what happens when we have dialogue. But I do know that there are some great professors that do teach the Western canon, which is far too missing from American universities, is that American college campuses have become a place where they strive to have everyone look different but think the same. And in America, university and college tuition is through the roof, and students and parents have a moral obligation to know who is teaching their kids. And for these professors that have such a major objection for being on our professor watch list, if they don't say obscene things, then they will not end up on our watch list. I'm talking about professors that were excited about what happened on October 7th. I'm sorry, if you're excited about what happened on October 7th, then you deserve to be on a professor watch list, and people should know all about you. And if people want to fire you as a consequence of that, or if people don't want to go to that school as a consequence of that, then so be it. And so what was the criticism?
So, I mean, here's the problem with professor watch lists and things like that. Of course, those aren't neutral or impartial. And you heard the examples that were brought up earlier, like abortion, socialism, things of that nature are seen as controversial or deserving of being on a watch list if a professor expresses a view on that particular topic. Academic freedom is really important, and it's something that the right at least likes to champion almost in name only. You know, they like to say that you shouldn't be able to fire someone because they express unpopular views. They should be able to give talks. Someone like Charles Murray, who wrote the infamous bell curve that wrongly argues that there is some sort of connection between race and IQ, and that could explain certain things about society. Conservatives are always coming to his defense, claiming that he should be able to speak on college campuses, even though his views are unpopular. So something about the university setting is it's supposed to be where unpopular and controversial ideas are discussed. So Charlie putting people on a watch list and professors on a watch list because they're expressing unpopular opinions is antithetical to the purpose of the university, which is to foster that type of dialogue and conversation. In direct response to October 7th, I just don't know specifically the professors he's mentioning. Do I doubt that there are certain professors who were less than eager to condemn the events of October 7th? Yes. And I don't think that's something that we should see it as like completely disqualifying from being a professor. I think, I've talked about my views on it, so I don't want to get too down in the weeds with this. But like I said before, it should be a place where people are open to having these conversations. And these professor watch lists are really just professor harassment lists is what they are. If people don't want to go to these schools, that's fine. If people don't like what the professor is saying, that's fine. But to put them on a watch list like this, it's like blacklisting or red listing, like from the McCarthy era. Like, it's just, you know what I mean? Like, it's antithetical to what they claim to want, which is free expression, open inquiry, and discussion of ideas. But they seem to only really extend that to those who share their ideological persuasion. So because of that, I don't really take Charlie seriously here. I don't take him seriously in general, as we'll see in this video. But just in general, I think it's a ludicrous claim to make. I don't think that schools and the colleges are like left-wing indoctrination factories. As someone who just graduated from one of the most left-leaning institutions, I will say that there are definitely some narratives that get pushed around, and if you don't align with every bit of that, you can sometimes be ostracized. So he's not totally wrong there. But to suggest that like you have to accept certain ideals in order to pass a class, or like the professors, I would say no. I mean, now granted, I just graduated from Oberlin. I was a political science, philosophy, and legal studies major. So just in general, those aren't super, like, inherently far left. I mean, of course, a lot of the professors are, and a lot of the student body was, but I never felt like I needed to conform to that. I mean, so I don't know. I think that Charlie's incorrect in claiming that there's some sort of like left-wing indoctrination that's occurring. I think there sometimes can be groupthink. I think there sometimes can be a bit of ideological dogmatism. And that's, something that we should push back against. But to say that there's like this discrimination against conservatives is just weird. Okay, conservatism is an ideology, not a protected class. If people are criticizing you and don't like you because they don't like your ideas, so they don't like what you stand for, like, congrats, like, I'm sorry, like, sucks to suck. That's just the consequences of your actions and words and beliefs. And if you don't like that, too bad. I do think we should have an effort to understand those who are different than us and think differently. But, you're not persecuted because you express your shitty opinions and then people respond in kind. So I don't want to go on too much of a tangent. I've already been talking way too long and Charlie has not even said that much. But I just kind of want to push back against that.
Exactly.
It was that the Welsh list supports what it claims to deride, which is the intimidation and ostracization.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
of those.
sorry, thank you. If the publicizing of certain ideas is intimidation, then I think that's just laughable. It is using our own free speech to expose professors who we believe are making America a worse country. And in fact, I believe in America, higher education has largely posed a threat to Western values. And I think we need more students and more parents to realize the moral rot that universities have become in the Western world.
All right.
So Turning Point Academy mentions the importance of promoting intellectual growth. How would you respond to critics that such an education system stifles intellectual growth through establishing a fixed set of values, for example, regarding God, life beginning at conception, and two genders, rather than promoting intellectual diversity?
Sure. I mean, at some point, you're going to have to get to a truth claim. So even to say that you want intellectual diversity means that you think intellectual diversity matters, but by what standard? So you have to actually, at some point, say that something is good. So if someone says, well, the criticism that you're going to tell a kid that something is good, something else, you should have intellectual diversity. Okay, why? By what standard? By what book? By what scholar? By what author? By what worldview? We believe, as a organization,
this is relativism. I mean, this is what he's trying to do. He's trying to say that, oh, by telling us that we're just indoctrinating kids with certain values, you can't criticize us because you don't have any values to stand on. It's such an asinine argument, really. Just because we can agree on certain things doesn't mean that we should therefore, just because we have to have a foundation somewhere, just because there has to be some sort of foundation of intellectual diversity or intellectual growth being a good thing, it doesn't necessitate from that therefore we should instill a bunch of other values downstream of that. You know what I mean? So we can agree that there just have to be certain things that we agree upon are good within the education system, such as intellectual growth. But it doesn't follow from that therefore we also have to teach that God, two genders, and whatever they just said, life begins at conception. It doesn't follow from that. You know what I mean? Like, you should teach people how to think. You should teach them, how to interpret ideas, how to break down an argument, but you don't teach them that God exists, or instill into them a meta-ethical framework in which God must exist for there to be any value. That is just, like she said, and like she posed, indoctrination in the opposite way. You know what I mean? So they're not mad that the left is like indoctrinating kids exactly. They're not mad at with indoctrination, because they just want to do it in the other direction. They want to instill conservative ideals in schools, right-wing ideas in schools. The whole PragerU, if you've heard of them, they're trying to get their curriculum put in schools. So they just want to be the ones indoctrinating, okay? So they're accusing us of what they desire to do. That's all it is. So it's ridiculous.
The West is the best for many reasons. In particular, my own personal views. I'm a Christian. I'm not ashamed of it.
Hold on. Okay, I'm not ashamed of it. It's funny. Whatever. Teaching that the West is the best is indoctrination, is instilling into them ideas that instead of having them come to their own conclusions. So once again, he's not about free thinking. He's about thinking that leads to the conclusion that the West is the best. Let's ignore all of the genocides, all of the bombings, all of the coups, all of that, and just whitewash all of that because the West is the best. So no, like, you know what I mean? Like, we should not have a foundation of saying the West is the best. We would teach about the West, teach about its shortcomings, teach about its successes. You know what I mean? Like, that's how it should be done. We should not have students coming out of college thinking that America's perfect or America doesn't have serious moral wrongs and failings that were embedded into its foundation that exist to this day. And you know, that's largely what they want to do. They want to lie to students. They want to lie to college students so that they agree with them, because the truth doesn't make them look very good.
And Christianity brought to the world things that we all take for granted. Tom Holland, who actually was educated here and is one of the great classicists and taught himself
Tom
ancient
Holland?
Greek, he wrote in his book Dominion that even if you
Spider-Man?
hate Christianity, your critique of Christianity is actually using Christianity itself.
How?
And so this idea of intellectual diversity, I totally support that. And I think that students...
He's not substantiating any of that, because it's fucking bullshit, frankly. The idea that these things come from Christianity is just false. Christianity adopted many of these things. Love your neighbor as yourself, the golden rule, thou shalt not kill. These are not Christian principles. They're universal human principles that Christianity co-opted and said that they're now ours, and if you use them, well, you're really just covertly using our religion. So, no, you just stole those. You didn't make those up. Those things existed before Jesus, okay? Like, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And of course he's not going to give any examples. He's just going to say that because there's nothing there.
Should read different books and should read different authors. At some point, though, the purpose of education is not to have an endless buffet line for students to sample every bad idea in the world. It's to point them to the good, the true, and the beautiful. And I think we've lost what the purpose of education is. Education in Latin literally means to lead forth. To lead forth out of the cave was the original.
I don't actually know if that's what it means in Latin, but considering Charlie Kirk thinks fetus means little human being when it just means offspring, I'm not going to trust anything what he says in terms of Latin translation, because he is literally incapable of getting that right. In terms of the purpose of education, yeah, we shouldn't give them every single bad idea. I'm not saying we, teach flat Earth propaganda alongside that, normal geoscience and earth sciences. But people should be exposed to different ideas, different ideas that you disagree with. This is the problem with Charlie Kirk, is he's distinguishing between good and bad ideas with ideas he agrees with and is sympathetic to, with ideas that he's not. Okay? That's all it is. You're replacing one form of, quote, indoctrination with another. That's all that's going on here. Let's continue.
Analogy. And so at Turning Point Academy, we take the biblical idea to train a child up in the ways in which they will go, and we make no apologies for instituting a belief that believing in God is better than secularism. The defense of universal human equality is a good for all humanity, amongst many other things that you articulated.
So you're just indoctrinating them to believe in God. This is the problem with these people. They say they want open inquiry. They want people having conversations. They want people to come to their own conclusions. But they're instilling in them from birth that there is this God, and you can't question that. Like, are you seriously? You can't argue for the reasoning process and people coming to their own conclusions when the basis of that inverts the reasoning process. That's all religion is. It inverts the reasoning process. First you have to accept this set of principles and beliefs on faith, and you reason from there. That's not how it works. You don't reason. You don't get a conclusion. You don't start with a conclusion and then reason toward that conclusion you've already come to. You reason towards whatever conclusion there is. So this is all bullshit. Okay? He just wants to be the one indoctrinating. The indoctrination thing is a smokescreen so that they can be the ones indoctrinating.
So how would you reconcile the importance of freedom, which is listed as Turning Point USA's mission on your website, with the restrictions on bodily autonomy, which you support, including abortion, trans-affirming healthcare, and birth control? And how would you respond to criticism of your limited view of freedom?
Sure. So first of all, birth control I don't have that strong of views of. So except for the fact that I've criticized how actually young women that take hormonal birth control might have side effects that are not always disclosed to them. As far as abortion and trans-affirming care, I'll get into that in a second, but I find it laughable, not from you, of course, but some of the people that are always very critical of, Charlie, why don't you just believe in bodily autonomy? I'm sorry, didn't you just mandate a vaccine for the last couple of years? I couldn't visit your country for 2 years because I didn't take a vaccine. So it's my body, my choice, unless so it's my body, my choice if it's another human being in the womb, but it's not my body, my choice if I want to take a vaccine. That was neither safe.
Yeah, that's correct. This is no way a contradiction. I hear this all the time. This is BS. One, no one was forcing a needle into your arm. Okay? No one was. No one was forcing a needle into your arm. There might be some societal consequences if you choose not to get a vaccine, but you were not forced to get it. You were not going to go to jail if you didn't get a vaccine. So this is not the same way. Also, someone getting an abortion doesn't affect you at all in terms of health. Okay? No one can walk into a supermarket and like have an abortion and then infect other people with that. It poses no other risk. It is the case with vaccines that they do pose a risk to other people. So absolutely, you don't have to get a vaccine. No one's going to force you to get a vaccine. You're right that there is bodily autonomy here, and we're not going to force you to get a vaccine. But airlines might require you to get a vaccine. Certain places might require you to get a vaccine to enter. That's just the societal consequences to keep society safe. There's no parallel here whatsoever at all.
Nor effective. And we all must be very honest about the fact that the public health experts of both of our countries never apologize for the fact that they made you take a vaccine that, by the way, has a lot of side effects for a lot of people in this room, and no one wants to say that. As a side note, though,
what are you talking about? Of course vaccines have side effects. They can have side effects. I don't know anyone who was saying they don't have side effects. Of course they do. This is the conservative brain rot that likes to invoke the nirvana fallacy, if you've heard of it, which is the no perfect solution fallacy of like, well, you can take a vaccine and still get sick. Yeah, it makes you sick for less long and less likely to spread the virus. So it's stupid. It's just stupid.
All the bodily autonomy people, and you guys can laugh all you want, it's fine. All the bodily autonomy people suddenly got really silent when we decided to say, we're going to control your body and control the movement of what you can do. You can't go to the pub. You can't go to the local gathering of friends. You can't go to university. You can't even go into the UK if you don't have a card. So that's a fun contradiction for me. At the same time, there's a difference between freedom or liberty and license. Liberty is the pursuit of things that allow human beings to flourish at its highest possible potential. License is not those things. So on the first thing, you do not have a ability, and I'm sure there will be a question about this, under any agreed upon Western morality, which is derived from a Christian construct, to murder another human being. You do not have that freedom. And so we believe, obviously, because we believe in very basic biology and science, that life begins at conception, and therefore that life deserves universal human rights as applied equally under our laws. As far as trans-affirming care...
Let's first get into that for a second. No, that's not how it works. First off, he's loading his definition. He's intuition pumping. So he's using loaded language to say it's murder. Murder is the unjustified killing by definition. Many people would say that it's not murder because it's not unjustified. You can make a Western argument in the other direction. He's saying that no one has a right to murder. First off, it's not murder, but I can very quickly go down this path. We can make an argument from self-ownership, basically Lockean property claims and self-ownership that people actually have a right to abortion. So if we think about it, what was in the founding documents of our country, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that was in the Declaration. That was derived, Jefferson derived it from John Locke in his treatise on human nature, I think. Treatise on government. I don't remember the exact name. But he said a similar thing where it was life, liberty, and property. So if we talk about it, property is an inalienable right. Where bodily autonomy comes from is this idea of self-ownership. You own yourself. So in that sense, that is a human right, to be able to own yourself. And there's nothing that could be more antithetical to a Lockean view of property rights, a Western view of property, of self-ownership, of freedom, than telling someone they have to use their body to sustain the life of another. We can even call it a human if you want. It would be of the species Homo sapien, so it is a human life, human being, person, totally different conversation, but Charlie will equivocate those till the cows come home. But no, it's not. It's not murder for various reasons, but for making a bodily autonomy claim, in no other situation does someone have a right to use your body without your consent, your bodily organs without your consent. We don't see that anywhere, except when it comes to women, because of course we don't view women as full human beings. So, ridiculous claim here.
As far as if you want to do something over the age of 18, knock yourself out. You guys actually have been better than our country on this. You have the Cass report that our country has lost its mind, where the Cass report itself issued an opinion based on my limited but somewhat understanding of it, that trans-affirming care for children is highly questionable at best. And so we all can agree that students that are not, or young people that are not yet of age or mature age of 18, of course we limit certain freedoms or licenses or liberties for 15-year-olds. In my country, they can't own guns till they're 18. In my country, they can't even drink till they're 21. In my country, they can't vote until they're 18 in America. And so until someone is of age, you're going to limit that. And so I believe that we should all agree that young people in particular, 15, 16, 17, there should be a prohibition that you should not be able to cut off your breasts or go under life-altering, irreversible, gender-affirming care just because you might be going through a temporary phase.
So
First off, temporary phase, wild, I think, for many people who undergo this. It's definitely not temporary phase. Also, we're talking about a very limited number of cases. So, a lot of people, not a lot of people, but individuals who have gender dysphoria often go on puberty blockers in order to delay puberty from occurring so that they're more comfortable in their body. I know that there is some mixed science on this, or there is more science coming out that suggests that there can be some side effects of that, and they're not fully reversible because things like bone density don't develop at the right time, and that can lead to more brittle bones. Of course, there's going to be side effects to all these things. There's nothing that is free of side effects whatsoever at all, So I think just in general, this is why it should be a decision that is left in the hands of doctors, parents, and patients themselves, and not the government, because of how individual of a medical decision it is. It's not like someone can just walk in. A kid can walk in to a hospital and just get their breasts chopped off or get like some surgery. That doesn't happen. So this is largely a manufactured issue by conservatives where they love to do this. They pluck a few cases and turn it into this massive thing that we need to care about, when largely these are difficult decisions that have to be made, and they should be made between doctors and patients and the parents. Okay, that's who should be involved, not the government. And the same thing goes with abortion. So that's where it comes from here.
Spoke about vaccines and the COVID-19 vaccine. How would you respond to accusations about you misusing your platform and purporting misinformation during the COVID-19 pandemic, including speaking against the COVID vaccine and speculating about deaths caused by it, and being briefly banned from Twitter for claiming that hydroxychloroquine was 100% effective in treating the virus?
Well, I'm back on Twitter now, thankfully. New ownership. I appreciate the question. Has anyone asked our public health leaders that question? Will they apologize for everything they got wrong? The lockdowns were completely unnecessary. They should never have happened. And the young people of the West lost proms, graduation, whatever equivalent you have here in the UK, for no good reason whatsoever. And you guys...
That is a lie, okay? So there's always going to be trade-offs that are made in terms of public health. Were the lockdowns difficult and hard on a lot of people? Was it hard for a lot of kids who weren't able to go to school and were seeing the effects of that? Yes. But for Charlie to completely gloss over the fact that over 1 million Americans died from the coronavirus, and to say, yeah, but some kids didn't get to go to prom, didn't get to go to their graduation or something. Yeah, of course, that sucks, but we're in a global health, a public health crisis. It is a pandemic. So yes, everyone's going to have their life shaken up, and did have their life shaken up. We would have a much higher death toll if there were no lockdowns whatsoever at all. So of course there can be a conversation about how effective lockdowns are, and whether, they should have gone to the extent that they were, and if there were difficulties and challenges there, of course. But to downplay it and suggest that, that we should just not have them at all because people still died or something is the fallacy of closing your umbrella in the rain because you're not getting wet. This is what is causing more people not to die. In terms of public health leaders and stuff like that, scientists do admit when they're wrong. That's the thing. Scientists, of course, they're not going to get everything right. But there's a difference between working on the best available information you have and happening to get it wrong, and deliberately spreading misinformation about things you don't know about. Those things are super different. And Charlie was absolutely doing the latter. He's not an epidemiologist. He's not a doctor. He doesn't know about these things. He's peddling the latest conspiracy that popped into his inbox. So there's not an equivalence here, okay? Scientists getting stuff wrong because they were acting on the best available information they had, and that has since changed, is different than intentionally spreading misinformation. No equivalency whatsoever at all.
Suicide rates of young people in the West went up after COVID. There's speech delays. There's a misery problem. And we locked down the generation of people that needed to be locked down the least, that have now bared the consequences the most, on top of a hyperinflation crisis, which caused a housing crisis, which has caused a sovereign debt crisis. All for what? Because we were worried that something that materially was never a greater threat than the seasonal flu to these people in this room it was never a greater threat than the seasonal flu. That is a fact of science, because we have to trust the science. And again, we can go back and forth, but this is the more important thing. It was never about trusting the science.
Okay, let's first break down a ton of that there. First, he's talking about how, shutting everything down was so terrible, and we saw an increase in the suicide rate and things like that. Of course, absolutely, there are trade-offs here, and there are going to be serious side effects from that. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have locked down in a certain capacity. We can get into arguments all day about exactly how much lockdown there should have been versus not. Was it too long? Was it too short? But the reality is, of course, people have to stop interacting with each other when there is this type of virus. And Charlie's also advocating against the two things that would make lockdowns less necessary, which is masks and vaccines. So if you don't want lockdowns, encourage everyone to wear masks and get vaccinated at that time. And we wouldn't have been in the situation where we needed a longer lockdown. He's talking about things like inflation. Of course you're going to have inflation happen. Like, these are things that are going to happen when you shut down an economy and then restart it. Of course, this is why it was so idiotic when people were blaming Biden for high gas prices. Like, it was insane. Like, if we're thinking about it, if you shut down, for example, no one's going anywhere, or if people aren't traveling as much, oil suppliers are going to lower the supply of oil. They're not going to be drilling as much when there isn't as high of a demand for oil, so they're going to lower the supply. Then, as things ramp up again, people are going to want oil to drive their cars because we're coming out of a pandemic, and then they're going to start wanting oil more. The problem is the supply chain needs to catch up to the demand. So in the time where the supply chain has not caught up to the demand, you're going to see rising gas prices because of supply and demand. There's a lower supply and there's a rising demand in which the supply can't meet that. So of course they're going to be higher prices, but that's just how it works. Like, it's not, the solution to this is never take any mitigation measures because there might be some side effects or there might be some downstream consequences. That is ludicrous. It's of course always going to be a trade-off, and there are things we can do to help our young people, okay? Have more access to mental health care. Charlie is largely against there being more government-funded programs. How about government-funded health care that would also include mental health care for young people? That would help lower the suicide rate, but Charlie doesn't give a shit about that. So no, it's insane. It's ridiculous.
It was about trusting the scientists.
Okay, I want to go back to
this view.
Hold on.
Never about trusting the science. It was about trusting the scientists that confirm this view.
So I want to go into that claim a little bit more. The way we understand science is through scientists. They are trained and they are experts in this area to understand the definition. If you gave me an article on epidemiology or gave me a study on neuroscience or something like that, I wouldn't be able to adequately read that study in a way that a scientist would to get that information. And the average layperson absolutely can't. What is it? I think the average American reads at like a 6th grade level. How are they supposed to trust the science when they're not equipped to read a scientific study? We have to trust the scientist. Can the scientists be wrong? Of course they can be wrong. But very rarely, unless we're talking outside of like experimentation that happened during the Holocaust, are scientists acting maliciously. Scientists can get things wrong. They often do. Science is a self-refuting field. We're constantly trying to get new information and refine our methods. But you can't, what do you mean trust the science? A lot of us aren't equipped to understand the science because we haven't studied it as long as these scientists. We trust scientists all the time with our decisions and what we do. This is no different, okay? I trust the people who manufactured my car that it's not going to explode. I don't know how my car works. I don't know all the intricacies, but I know that it has to be inspected. I know that it needs oil changes at a certain point. I know that there are things that have to be done in order to have it work. The same thing is true with public health in terms of all of the variables. And scientists and doctors and people who study these things are better equipped to make those decisions, much more equipped than the average person. The whole idea of do your own research is ridiculous. What are you going to do? How are you going to study the effectiveness of a vaccine or something like that? You think most people are equipped to read a longitudinal study that analyzes this and has a control group and has a double-blind peer review? No, absolutely not. They rely on other people who already agree with them to confirm what they already believe. So it's ridiculous, ludicrous. No. Trust the scientists. Of course you should trust scientists. You trust a scientific consensus. Can scientists get things wrong? Of course they can. I'm not saying trust every individual scientist, but if there is a consensus within the scientific community, especially if you don't have knowledge in that field, who are you to stand up against the scientific community and say, no, you're wrong on the effectiveness of masks and vaccines, just because some fringe is saying that they're wrong? It's ludicrous. No. You are not equipped. Trust the science inherently means trust the scientists, because they are the ones who are equipped and trained to interpret the science in a way that the average person is completely out of their depth.
Thing called the Barrington Declaration. If you don't know what this is, all of you have a moral obligation to know what it is. The Barrington Declaration was thousands of scientists from around the world that said these lockdowns are doing more harm than good. And the one thing that we never talked about through all of this, that now the pharma companies magically discovered after they were able to proliferate a vaccine, is early interventions. Is the fact that if you catch COVID early, what is your vitamin D level? Let's have a serious conversation about whether or not you're chronically overweight. In my country, we are a fat country. We're good at a lot of things. We're also really good at gaining weight. Why didn't we also say to the American people, and be honest, if you are 50 pounds overweight, you have a much higher likelihood of dying of COVID? Well, that would be considered to be politically insensitive in America.
No. Of course, if you are overweight, that is a complicating factor that will lead, or pre-existing condition, that will lead to you being more likely to get severely ill. Of course, people were always talking about that. No one was denying that there are preventative things you can do to generally keep yourself healthy. Like, what the fuck? Do you think most people are against this idea that if you're generally a healthy person, you're going to be less likely to get really sick from a virus? Yeah. If you are a healthier person and your immune system is stronger, of course you're going to have an easier time fighting off a virus. Like, what? Obviously. Charlie's acting like the left and people on the left are against people being in good shape. If anything, we are in favor of people having access to more nutritious meals. We're in favor of people having access to food stamps and things that allow them to be have better quality life. We want them to have more health care. We want them to have these types of things. Charlie likes to reduce systemic issues to individuals and just look at someone and say, you're fat, it's your fault. No, that's not how things work, okay? If you genuinely care, then you would support funding medical efforts and healthcare efforts that would address these problems. But you don't, because you don't care. You just want to blame people for their own problems that are systemic, that lead to this type of thing. So, ludicrous, ridiculous. And I don't, the Barrington Declaration, I don't know anything about it, so I'm not going to speak on it. But it doesn't strike me as surprising when scientists get together and question the consensus within the scientific community. I have no doubt that there were harms that were caused from lockdowns. Of course, if you isolate people. I experienced that firsthand as a junior in high school. Junior, senior in high school as a 17-year-old. Obviously, yes, of course, I get it. It sucked. It was rough. And of course I felt more down. Of course I felt more depressed. Of course there were things that were bad about it. But, you know, then it's a question of where is the overweighing harm, okay? And if it means that hundreds of thousands more Americans don't die and I have to just be in my house for like 8 months, that is absolutely a trade-off that we should be willing to make. But of course, since we are such an individualistic society, that would never happen. I don't want my tax dollars going to other people's healthcare. Why do we expect that these people will be willing to make personal sacrifices to keep other people healthy when they won't even sacrifice a dollar to help other people have better access to healthcare? It's the conservative mindset and the individualistic mindset that is toxic, that will lead to the downfall of society because people genuinely don't give a shit about anyone who's outside of their very immediate circle. It's bad, okay? Like this is a toxic type of ideology that will lead, I'm not even kidding, to our demise if we let it keep going.
So how do I respond to critics? Honestly, I'm proud of the work that we did during COVID. I opposed the lockdowns from the beginning. We talked about early interventions. We platformed people that were right all along. And meanwhile, the people that got the most important public policy questions of our time wrong have never felt any sort of criticism. They've never actually faced justice. And I think we, the people of the West, deserve an apology from our leaders for all the suffering that they inflicted on the young people of both our countries.
What? Look how he's not giving any examples. He's not giving any examples. He's talking about the vaccine earlier. I assume that he's just talking about the efficacy of lockdowns and masks and that sort of thing. Scientists get things wrong. So there may have been things along the way that they got wrong. No one's saying that like they were perfect. Of course not, because it's an evolving field and there's new information that's coming in every day. We were dealing with a virus that we didn't know that much about. So of course there's going to be wrong things along the way. Of course there's going to be collateral harms. Of course. No one's denying that lockdowns have side effects. Absolutely. But what do you want scientists to do? Yeah, sorry, we were acting on our best available information and we happened to get some stuff wrong. Sorry, that's how science works. Like what? It's not scientists that are at fault for the fact that our economy is based on the fact that if you miss a day of work or a week of work, it's life-threatening, or it's a serious affront to you. That's the system of capitalism. That's the system that we live in that makes people live paycheck to paycheck. So if you want people to be able to survive longer without working, if they need to, then advocate against the economic system that you are so in favor of. It's that simple. But of course you won't, because you don't care. This is all a facade.
So you've described recently how it used to be 10 vaccines, now it's 72 shots for our babies. Something's not right and our kids are sicker than ever. How would you respond to criticism that your rhetoric regarding vaccinations is dangerous and irresponsible when considering a global rise in vaccine distrust and deaths from vaccine-preventable diseases, including measles and meningitis?
Well, first of all, number one, you can use your own agency and you can get 9 COVID shots if you want. I'm not preventing that. I think, though, that a robust conversation needs to happen that inoculations have risen across America. I'll just talk about America. I know this for certain. Inoculation and vaccine rates have risen, and chronic diseases are higher than ever. And there is a perplexing rise in a lot of the secondary and third tier issues. Of course, I'm pro-vaccine. If you want to get vaccines, we should do it prudently, we should do it appropriately, we should do it smartly. But at this
So here's the problem with his thing. It's correlation causation, and it's also, like I said, the fallacy of closing your umbrella in the rain because you're not getting wet. Just because there's an increase in illness and an increase in vaccines doesn't mean that the vaccine is causing the increase in illness. What you have to look at is the unvaccinated population, and what you see is they're much more likely to get sick from these diseases. They're much more likely to get sick from measles. So of course there's a general increase. Who's causing the fucking increase? You can't just say, whoa, look at this, we're seeing an increase, therefore it's the vaccines. That's very faulty and poor reasoning. But of course, Charlie is no stranger to that whatsoever at all. Charlie's like, I'm pro-vaccine, but let me put out all of this, like, I'm just asking questions, as they love to hide behind. I'm just asking questions, okay? Like, shut up.
same way, we should also simultaneously respect medical freedom and religious conscience. The criticism is this. I'm not a scientist and I don't play one on TV, but I use human reason and one would say common sense to also ask the very simple question. The public health authorities got almost every major problem of every question of COVID wrong. Why should we continue to delegate trust to them? Trust is earned, it is not given. And so, yeah, look, I'm sure someone's.
What are you talking about? They didn't get everything wrong about COVID. Of course, if you wear a mask and stay away from people, you're less likely to catch the virus. Yeah, of course. They didn't get everything wrong either. You're focusing and honing in on a absolutely fast developing thing, like a rapidly developing situation in which they had so much information being thrown at them that they had to analyze all of this information with things they didn't know, and they got some things wrong. Like that is just normal. But they have gotten so many things right as well. Ebola was a thing. Now it's not. Swine flu was a thing. Now it's not. Because of scientists, okay? Because of the research they do. You only see the failures of science because you don't experience the successes. Because the success of epidemiology and the success of vaccines is normalcy. But when there are failures, of course, or when we make mistakes, you see it because there are more problems. And then what you do is you look, we're having all these problems when you don't see the successes. It's the bias, selection bias. So I don't know what he's on about.
I'm going to ask a question or two about that. That's fine. I'm by no means a quote unquote expert on all that. But let me also question this. The experts, they have to now, number one, you have to apologize when you get something really wrong. And I think you have to get back into the public square and prove to us why we should trust you when, for example, in my country, I'm not sure if it was for you guys, we had this thing of 6 feet to slow the spread. Anthony Fauci just made it up. The data shows that he just arbitrarily made it up. There is not a single public health reason why we had 6 feet to slow the spread. Locking down schools. Actually,
so first part about that 6 feet to slow spread, I did hear that number was somewhat made up. first off, it is the case that if you're further away from someone, obviously you're going to be less likely to catch a virus. So at the beginning, of course, there were people who were throwing things out there that would potentially help reduce the spread. So it wasn't that it was false, because of course, if you are farther away from someone, especially when it's an airborne virus, you are less likely to catch that. Just because the exact number was just hypothesized because they didn't have time to do double-blind studies on this with a rapidly developing thing doesn't mean we shouldn't trust them. Of course, 6 feet to slow the spread. You know what that means? You think people were fucking measuring to see how far they were? What do you think people think when they think 6 feet to slow the spread? They think, let me be farther away from people. Let me not huddle in a congregation at a concert. That's what the meaning behind it is. No one's expecting you to get out a fucking tape measure and make sure you're exactly 6 feet. No, of course, you're just going to say 6 feet to slow the spread, to say that just, hey, keep your distance. That's what it means practically, okay? So, yeah, what do you like? No, really should have done a study right then to see how far someone needed to be before they didn't catch a virus. Like, what, Charlie? No, it means stay apart. Stay away from people. Keep your distance. Don't measure. Like, what? This is so stupid.
What made COVID worse and delayed the inevitable spread. The only country in Europe that I think was a model was Sweden. They kept schools open, they kept restaurants open, they leaned into herd immunity, and generally their statistics were way better than some of the other countries.
That's not true. They saw massive spikes in death. If you just look at the table, they saw massive spikes in death from COVID early on because they weren't instituting those metrics, and hospitalizations, and it was overrun. Like their healthcare system was overrun. They had to triage ventilators. I know Sweden is always propped up like that. Yeah, just because a lot of people died and there weren't many people to spread the virus. Like, that's not a success story whatsoever at all. So, yeah.
That were correlated to it. So everyone has the agency to do what they want to see fit. And yes, I do think that there is something troubling when the childhood vaccination schedule goes from 10 shots to 72 shots, some of which are things, for example, hepatitis B. Upon birth in America, I don't know how it is in the UK, within seconds, they will inoculate a child against hepatitis B. Number one, hepatitis B vaccine expires by the age of 13, and there's only 2 ways to get hepatitis B, through sexual intercourse or through intravenous drugs or some other correlated way. So unless it is a son or a daughter of an active drug user or a drug mom, totally get it, which you can test for in utero, the argument for hepatitis B vaccine within seconds of a baby being born is, I think, questionable at best. And so those of us that even...
So first off, I don't claim to know enough about epidemiology, and Charlie just said I'm not an expert, but goes on to make this claim. There are various ways you can get bloodborne pathogens that aren't by having sex or directly using drugs. First off, if you ingest something, that can get into the bloodstream. So if you ingest a certain type of food, if there are germs on something and you ingest it, that can lead to catching the virus. So obviously, yes, you should get a vaccine against hepatitis B, even obviously if you're not having sex, obviously, or doing drugs, because it can still get into your body in other ways, and it could be a very deadly disease. So there's no serious, severe, prevalent side effects. Of course, there are people who have those like conditions like Guillain-Barré syndrome or something where they do have that. And if there are reactions, of course, then you avoid it. But you know what I mean? It is possible, here's for an analogy, it is possible that when you're in your car and you're getting into a car crash, you get choked out by the seatbelt. And the seatbelt literally kills you. That's a possibility. It's happened before. I don't not wear my seatbelt in a car just because that is a possibility. The same way, it is possible that getting a vaccine can lead to severe side effects and I guess even death. But that doesn't mean you don't get a vaccine, because it's more likely to save you than in the very minimal cases lead to side effects. So it's ridiculous.
Ask the question, why are we using a hepatitis B vaccine when we could maybe wait till they're 12 or 13 and when they're sexually active? No, you must do it, and you must just try.
12 or 13 when they're sexually active, or when they're sexually active? The most charitable reading of that is he's saying 12, 13, or, but okay. I mean, also, how many kids do you think are going to be like, Mom, I'm having sex now, I need to get my hepatitis V vaccine? Like, no, what? No, what? Ridiculous.
The science, okay, well, that's not good enough for us.
So Turning Point USA acquired Students for Trump in 2019 and worked on targeting students on college campuses, especially ahead of the 2020 election. However, despite an increase in youth turnout in 2020, Trump support was worse with young people in several battleground states than 2016. How would you respond to critics who claim that this failure was partly due to Trump outsourcing youth outreach to Turning Point USA?
How did he do this last election?
Well, I mean, his support was better in youth, but it was still lower with the lower amongst youth than the Democrat support was.
We won the youth vote in the state of Michigan, and we ran basically the entire youth operation in 2024. In fact, anyone can look on ChatGPT, Grok, or Google. I mean, whatever you want. Like, we crushed the youth vote. Even Democrats acknowledge it. There's story after story after story. Why are young people moving so far to the right?
Young men.
Will you give me credit
Young
for that?
men.
I mean, why do you think that, like, in several key states, even in 2024, amongst the young people...
We did anywhere between 10 to 25 points better in the key battleground states. This is not just conjecture, it is material fact. Both young men and young women moved to the right dramatically. In America, young people are Donald Trump's most loyal cohort, not even baby boomers. What? According to the Yale Youth Poll and the Harvard Youth Poll, Donald Trump has actually made the most gains amongst younger voters. And I guess maybe something we did had something to do with that.
He's still overwhelmingly unpopular with young people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's still, like, for specific demographics, especially young women, overwhelmingly unpopular. So just so you're doing a little bit better doesn't mean that you're not still grossly unpopular. I think it's a weird question to ask. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many better questions. Don't you think that, you know, you, instead of Trump going to the colleges, might have hurt him in 2020? Like, what type of question is this?
And what do you see as the future of conservatism amongst young people?
I think it's going to be the dominant, God willing, dominant worldview amongst young people in America, and it's ascendant. Again, what we are seeing in the States, and I don't know if it's the case here in the UK, young men in particular are on pace to be the most conservative generation in history. Yep, and it's an exciting trend, and we're leaning into it. We see this in the macro trends. We also see this micro. Young women are following suit. There's kind of two Gen Zs. There's Gen Z that was basically out of college or near end of college at COVID, and then there was Gen Z that was in high school. What would the equivalent term here be in high school? Whatever you call...
Yeah,
okay. And they had their lives obliterated. Those are the most formative times of their life, 15, 16, 17, 18. They were forced to wear masks. They had to do school through Zoom. Yeah. They saw friends that, many of whom that took their life, or suicide rates went up exponentially. And also, on top of that, we had this insane race stuff in America during 2020, otherwise known as Floydapalooza, where we just...
Oh my God. Insane race stuff is an insane way to put it. Are you saying a black man was murdered by a police officer who knelt on his neck for 9 minutes? You mean we had insane, out-of-control police officers is what you're saying, right? Right? Or, no, people responding to that was insane. Like, what? Oh my God, Floydapalooza? Like, what the fuck? In what world are we, like saying, oh my God, yeah, he died, and therefore, you know, we should make, like, some sort of big joke about that? Like, what? Huh? People were outraged at the fact that an officer kneeled on his neck for 9 minutes while he said, I can't breathe? And then suddenly, like, people are mad about that? Ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
To burn our country because a guy drug overdosed on the streets of Minneapolis, and the
oh my God, that's just
true. He did drug overdose.
It's factually not the case. This is just it's a racist lie. The autopsy from the coroner said that it was that it was homicide, that it was a result of asphyxiation, that he died. Charlie will continue to peddle this lie until he dies because he wants to suck the boot. He wants to be a bootlicker. It's so far down his throat of cops. That's what he wants to do. But it's just not the case. No. He was murdered by the police officer. Factually the case. He had marijuana in his system, which is not going to overdose you, and he had a minimal amount of methamphetamine and fentanyl in his system, likely taken like days before, and was still there. Not enough to kill him. Factually the case. Like, what do you... You're acting like if someone has a wound in their stomach or something, and I come and punch them, and they're like, oh my God, my stomach hurts. Like, hey, we were saying that before. Okay, and it's worse now. Like, what? What? It's ridiculous.
Not just my opinion. Just read the medical examiner report.
We have read the medical examiner report. It doesn't say he overdoses. It said it was homicide. They ruled it a homicide. Jesus Christ.
The Hennepin County medical examiner report. And
yes. Absolutely. Hold on. No. God. Hennepin. Let's look this up right now. County, George Floyd. Cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement subdual, restraint, and neck compression. Date and hour of autopsy. Let's see. Okay. Blunt force injuries. He had a bit of fentanyl. He had stuff in his system. Cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating. So he had a heart attack, he had restraint, and he had neck compression. In what world are you talking about this? Also, if someone is more likely to die because they have drugs in their system and you do something that causes them to be incredibly anxious and thus they have a heart attack, that's still on you. Like, what? It's ridiculous. Like I said, it's like if someone's stomach is already hurting and you shoot him in the stomach and you're like, no, well, you see, your stomach was already hurting. Like, what? He's just dying. He's just lying now. Completely lying. Restrained by law enforcement. Okay. Ridiculous. All right.
So then all of a sudden we decided to like commit cultural suicide and throw statues. By the way, in London, they like threw a statue into the river or something because we're systemically racist. I'm sorry, our two countries are the two least racist countries ever to exist in the history of the world. And you guys should also be thanking the Lord that you have someone like William Wilberforce to look up to, and you should be building statues to Wilberforce, not taking down statues of your history. Because it's thanks to Western values that we abolish slavery, and the world is a profoundly better place because of that worldview, and we as conservatives are unafraid to tell that story. And
y'all were the ones who were in favor of slavery. Let's be so fucking for real. They love to tout Lincoln, okay? Love to tout Lincoln, despite the fact that who's flying the Confederate flag nowadays? Which party? Oh, I'm sorry, it's not Democrats, right? It's Republicans. Like, what? Oh my God. It's just an insane thing to say. I mean, it's also insane to say that we're the least racist countries. Like, are you kidding me? I don't even know how to like respond to that. Like, what? In what world? Okay.
truth.
So you've condemned the Civil Rights Act of 1964 as a huge mistake.
Correct.
Why do you believe it was a mistake to pass anti-discrimination legislation? And what do you think would be better policy for being treated fairly and equally, which you see as an American principle?
Yeah, nothing against the intent, but it was too broadly written and it played into something called disparate impact. Disparate impact was woven within the Civil Rights Act, and disparate impact basically says if two racial groups have different outcomes, the answer must be racism. It does not allow any legal nuance. So there are...
Not true. That is objectively false. Disparate impact as a theory takes that as something that should be looked into. Okay? Disparate impact says that if legislation is passed and there is a disparate impact, we should look into that disparate impact, okay? Like that's all it's saying, is that it's important to look at the consequences of legislation, and that saying there wasn't a racial intent behind it does not absolve the disparate impact. So no, disparate impact doesn't say that just if there's a difference between two groups, that therefore it must be the cause of racism. Of course, there can be benign disparities, and they do exist, but it's saying we should not completely look away just because we can prove that, no, these were all good-meaning people. It's still possible that it led to problems and led to racial gaps that ought to be filled, regardless of the intent.
4 components to, quote unquote, the anti-racist regime of America. I don't pretend to know what goes on in this country. I could just talk about America. I'm sure that's
one
fun.
of them, I bet, is melanin is your master. That's what Charlie Eagles love these. He has this. Wait for it. Melanin is your master?
And it's 4 components.
Here we go.
Affirmative action, critical race theory, DEI, and disparate impact. Those are
never mind. Well, he always says that with like critical race theory, but
Kind of the four components. All of them have their subsection. The Civil Rights Act led the way to affirmative action, which is weaponized, quote unquote, reverse racism against Asian and white people. And the Civil Rights Act also blazed the trail for disparate impact as a legal theory, basically saying that if black Americans are doing worse in a group, it might not be because of marital differences or cultural differences or single motherhood issues. It must be racism. And
that's
so because
not true. That's just objectively not the case. It looks into the reasons behind why that might be the case and say that legislation, for example, the crack cocaine disparity of the sentencing differences between like 100 years to or 10 years to 1 year disparity could be racist, in fact, even if there was no racial intent behind it, which there largely was. That's all it means. Also, all of these things, when he's talking about cultural differences, when he's talking about single motherhood, they always like to bring up single motherhood or absent fathers. Why are the fathers absent? Maybe because they're in jail, because we have a mass incarceration problem, or we don't fund schools well enough for people to be able to have a high-quality education. Have you thought about how all these things are interconnected? It's not like just cultures emerge out of nowhere. They emerge from material conditions that lead to them having issues. Like, what? It's ridiculous.
The Civil Rights Act was too broadly written. It's now being applied in my country as a way to get rid of voter integrity, to get rid of election integrity, to get rid of voter ID. The Civil Rights Act is also now being applied to put men in female locker rooms. So the intent, it should have been a single page or a two-page bill to say that you cannot discriminate against based on the color of somebody's skin, period, end of story. Instead, we get a multiple 100-page bill with lots of chapters and lots of lesser-known amendments that created basically a permanent anti-racist bureaucracy within our federal government to go find racism where it doesn't exist and create it in new places where otherwise did not exist.
So you've described Martin Luther King Jr. as awful, not a good person, even though many conservative commentators have spoken in support of what he says, including his quote, where they will be judged about his children, where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
Statement. He was right there.
So does his speech and his general ethos not then agree with your views on DEI?
No, I've complimented him as well, but I mean, first of all, he was a personally morally flawed man. And to be fair, a lot of people I sometimes look up to are morally flawed.
True.
But also, I mean, we're all morally flawed. We're all sinners. I would hope actually, many of you probably don't believe in God, so never mind. Look, Martin Luther King, in a lot of different ways, had a promise of a colorblind America. I don't want to go too deep into this because I don't know how, maybe it's very interesting to UK students about MLK, but there is a mythology around MLK that does not warrant the reverence that he gets treated with in America. Should he be mentioned amongst lots of people in the 20th century that was complicated and at the end of his life advocated for a more communistic view and then actually got away from race blindness and actually got towards race obsession? I'm totally cool with that.
I mean, he was further left. I mean, Charlie's acknowledging that. He was against capitalism. He was against militarism. So, you know, it's unfortunate when people on the right whitewash his statements by just using the color of their skin content of their character, quote, and nothing else. So, hey, you're right. He was much further left.
He did some things that were not so great. In America, though, you must understand, he is looked to as the new founding father. The main contention that I have with the Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights Movement and how it ended, not how it started, is that we refounded the country fundamentally. We cast aside our founding roots and our founding documents, the U.S. Constitution, and we decided...
Yeah, we did. We formally, legally ended racial segregation. That is a good thing. That is a breaking away from the founding of this country in a way that is good. Like, huh? Yeah, we should do that. We should break away from the founding in that way because the founding was bad. Full stop. It wasn't entirely bad. Of course, there were good things that came along with it. Of course, the document and some of the protections that are provided within, like the First Amendment, freedom of speech, things of that nature, were great in the Bill of Rights. But it did not live up to the promise. And of course, we should stray away from that in favor of ending racial discrimination, which was what the Civil Rights Act did when it was passed, along with the Voting Rights Act, both of which conservatives like Charlie Kirk are trying to do away with. It's ridiculous.
To basically usher in the Civil Rights Act as a new anti-racist dogma, creed, and I find something fundamentally wrong with that. Our birth certificate as Americans is the Declaration, and the law of the land is tied with the U.S. Constitution. It was not the Civil Rights Act. And so with all of that to say, we have a national holiday to MLK. We got rid of a national holiday for our first president and our founding father, George Washington.
When?
We used to call it Washington's birthday. Now we call it President's Day in our country. So that's just maybe some context to answer that question.
So you tweeted ahead.
That's not true. President's Day is a rotating holiday. It rotates. It's like the third Monday in February. It's not on the same day. It's a blatant lie. Washington's birthday is February 22nd every year, and President's Day is not the same day every year. So it made it a rotating holiday, and it's no longer George Washington's. Also, how many of the presidents have been white men? All but one. So how is it like, how are we making it woke when we say it's President's Day? Oh no, we're going to celebrate all the white men instead of one of them. Like, huh?
Of the January 6th Capitol attack, that Turning Point USA and Students for Trump was sending more than 80 buses of patriots to DC to fight for this president, although it ended up being 7. Do you see your claims, including
80.
that the election was stolen, as contributing to January the 6th?
I mean, it's somewhat of an irrelevant question, but no, of course not. In fact, our students were the ones that didn't even go to the Capitol and peacefully went home. But I mean, how deep into January 6th do you want to get? It wasn't an insurrection by any means whatsoever.
What?
There were some people that acted totally improperly, and they should not assault police officers or break windows. But there were also a lot of
And who pardoned them? I'm sorry, who pardoned the people who assaulted police officers on that day? The dude Charlie supports, President Trump.
people that walked into the Capitol building and the doors were open for them, and they walked between the queued lines that were there and said a prayer. And these are the people that walk around with pocket constitutions, and they were smeared in the largest witch hunt and manhunt, I should say, the largest manhunt in American law enforcement history that resulted in 1,300 arrests of nonviolent offenders that walked into the People's House in the United States Capitol building. While
That happens. And that makes sense. It literally was borderline crime scene. There was broken windows. There was like shattered glass, of course. Like all of that was the case. There was people. There were gates that were thrown over. That people were overrunning that building. You were not supposed to be in that building because of that. Because people were posing a threat. So if then you walk in the building after it's been broken into and walk around, yeah, you shouldn't be there, and you might get arrested for trespassing. Like what? You weren't allowed to be in there that day. Congress was certifying the vote. They weren't allowing people in because of what happened. So, like, it's ridiculous to claim that people shouldn't have been arrested or gotten consequences because, oh, it's the People's House. Yeah, the People's House was broken into by agitators and domestic terrorists, and then more people should not go into the building after that. If you see shattered glass on the ground, probably best not to go into the building, even if the doors are open. Okay, like, huh?
violent crime rose in almost every major city in the country. And so
What? How does that?
I don't know how much, maybe I'm sure there'll be a question on January 6th. So.
You've compared same-sex sexual behavior to drug and alcohol use and described it as an error and said you don't agree with the lifestyle. How would you justify these comments whilst also speaking about welcoming gay people into the conservative movement?
Well, first, we all have flaws. That's number one.
Oh
But
my God.
Number two, how do I justify? It doesn't matter what Charlie Kirk believes. That's a view derived from Scripture. And so it's the Bible talks very clearly about God's natural order. We see this reflected in the natural law. Some of my closest friends and closest people that work with me alongside Turning Point USA participate in a same-sex lifestyle, and that's their own prerogative. But if you ask me what I believe and why I believe it, it's derived straight from Scripture.
And you've spoken of marriage as between one man and one woman, even whilst polls have consistently shown most Americans as in support of same-sex marriage. How would you respond to critics regarding your position on this?
I don't derive my morality from up or down vote.
I mean, yeah, that's a stupid question.
How would you respond to criticism that far-right-wing discourse, particularly online, is inflamed by organizations such as Turning Point USA and your rhetoric, even as you condemn attendance of neo-Nazis?
These are just bad questions because he rejects the premise of the question. You know what I mean? Like, it's like asking, don't you think your rhetoric contributes to January 6th? Yeah, and he thinks that's a good thing. Or like parts of it were a good thing. So like, these are stupid questions because he already rejects this idea that there is this problem of right-wing extremism. So if he doesn't think that there's this serious issue of right-wing extremism, of course he's not going to say that he's contributing to that or that his organization is contributing to that. It's ridiculous.
At your events.
I don't even know how to respond to
Correct.
that. I mean,
Yeah.
how do I respond to critics that I'm inflaming tensions? If the truth inflames you, you have a problem. It's not my problem.
What do you see as the role of an institution such as Turning Point USA in shaping national discourse? And what do you think is next for the organization in terms of what you discuss?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're very known for hopefully what we'll see here, which is respectful dialogue. We have an open mic on campuses. I did over 100 hours of campus debates this semester, seen billions of times around the world. And yeah, look, as far as conservatism, we plan to win. And for the 3 conservatives that are here tonight, I hope you guys get your mojo back. This was once a great country. I want to see it great again. You guys are a husk of your former self. You guys, you can laugh and sneer all you want, but the country that split the atom and invented the steam engine and eradicated slavery and brought common law to the world can do a lot better than this. And
Why is it bad, though?
Your existence led to our existence. And for whatever I can do, I hope that this country...
You fought against, the Brits fought against American existence. Okay, like what? What?
Finds a leader or a group of leaders. I'm not here to give you political advice. I hate when foreigners do that to Americans. You guys do whatever you want. But I do have a wish that the world feels like it's missing something. It feels like it's missing something when Great Britain or England or whatever politically correct thing I have to say.
What?
Because I guess England, I can't fly an English flag now or whatever nonsense that is.
Once again, 95% of conservatism is them making up problems in their head or scenarios in their head and then getting mad at those problems. Who is telling Charlie he can't say England or Great Britain or the UK? Like, what? Huh? Or fly a flag? What? Jesus.
Like, be proud of your heritage. You've done good for the world. Stop apologizing. Get your energy, get your vitality, get what made England and made Great Britain such a phenomenal place. I hope you get that back, and I hope that you reject the swan song of multiculturalism and get back to the fundamental truism that a strong Britain means a strong world, and therefore a strong West, and we can stand up for what is good, true, and beautiful.
Would you agree with commentators that your politics have become more conservative in recent years, and what's caused this shift?
Yes. Partially, honestly, getting married and having children, something that I hope all of you do. Getting married and having children is an objective good thing for yourself and for society, and for, of course, your children. The fact that we're having less children in the West is a very alarming trend. And as I got more conservative, as I got married and I started to have a couple kids, I started to realize this is what I'm fighting for. And I understand the threats against their well-being and their livelihood. And then also I got more serious about my faith.
So you've spoken today.
Yeah, you got more conservative because you had a daughter, and would you have a 10-year-old daughter or something, and you'd force her to have a child if she was raped. That's just the case. So, like, okay, bud. All right, terrifying.
Against affirmative action in educational institutions. How would you propose making excellence in education more equitable for students from disadvantaged backgrounds?
IQ tests.
And do you see equal treatment?
That's a terrible metric. IQ is already a terrible metric, the way it was derived in terms of assessing intelligence. You can have a super high IQ and not do well in college. Like, what do you think that we should just base it off IQ scores? That's insane. No. Good Lord. No shock that dude who didn't go to college or dropped out of college doesn't understand how college and college admissions work.
As possible without considering...
No, just so we're clear, IQ tests don't have anything to do with background. I mean, meaning like, okay, if you have somewhat of an equal nutritional capacity, it doesn't matter how much you study or you get an IQ, maybe you can get an IQ tutor and boost it by a couple points, but we should bring back IQ tests in the West. Please continue.
No,
I was just going to say, do you see it as possible without considering any external factors for students when applying for higher education, such as economic background?
Well, external factors can be factored in, but affirmative action isn't that. At least in America, I don't know how it works here. Affirmative action in America is, we struck it down at the Supreme Court, thankfully, race-based, which is that a certain melanin content gets you certain points, and a certain melanin content gets you demerits.
Great, we're going to move...
So no, well, I guess finally they're moving into that. That's not how affirmative action actually works. No. What it would do is it would basically ensure that underprivileged schools weren't overlooked, schools that were predominantly African American. It also, Charlie disagrees with this because he's insane, doesn't think diversity is important. And there are many different forms of diversity. And one of those is racial diversity. And that is a good thing. And you should want to have a college that is diverse in terms of the student body in many different ways, one of them being race. There are many things people can't control. This idea that, you shouldn't be denied admission for something that you can't control is ridiculous. Colleges do this all the time with geographic diversity. A kid from Manhattan might not be accepted into a school because a farm boy from Idaho gets accepted instead because they want his diverse perspective that came from his upbringing. And people can have different upbringings, and one of those things that can affect someone's upbringing is their race. So there are many aspects. It's not like, oh, if you're black, you just get in. Like, of course not. Of course it's not that simple. It's one of many factors that was factored in, and they're going to keep doing this within college. There's going to be proxy questions. People are going to have the opportunity to talk about this. But we are going to see our colleges get less diverse, and that hurts everyone, not just minority students.
Now
Okay, am I stand here?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
great.
of the dispatch.
Thank you.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, the one.
All right, here we go. I'll move fast forward.
Please, we're going to Debrief from Sydney, Sussex.
Who's going up?
Come up and ask a question.
All right.
And remember, you have the right of response.
I have quite a simple question for you. Now, I know you've debated Dean Withers on Jubilee before. I was wondering why you now refuse to engage with further debate with him.
Oh, my God.
Wait, hold on. First of all, he's coming on my show this summer, and let me get this straight. I flew 5,000 miles across the world to have you ask why I'm not going to debate a left-wing YouTuber.
Well, I mean, he continuously tries to get your attention at your campus.
Right. Yeah, again,
and you just ignore him.
I've debated him twice in the last calendar year. He's coming on my show this summer. Let me be clear. I came to Cambridge to have you ask me that.
I mean, you talk about freedom, and I'm just using my freedom of speech to ask you a simple question.
No,
you seem to be dodging it for some reason.
No, I've debated him twice in the last year.
When?
And he's coming on this summer for a long-form discussion.
He debated him once on Jubilee. When was the second time, if I'm not mistaken?
But is this what I can expect?
Yeah, he's making videos about you avoiding him on your campus debates.
This is
Right,
kind
so
of a weird question. Like, move on to something more substantive at this point.
Let me tell you how this works. I do a campus event, like at Texas A&M University. I rent it out. I'm there for 3 hours. He shows up demanding to come up to the mic immediately, cutting in line of other students. It's not Joe Biden's America anymore where you can just cut in line and get whatever you want. So therefore, I say, excuse me, Dean, we'll talk at another time. He makes this YouTube video as if I'm scared to debate him, even though I debated him twice in the last year.
When was the second time?
Does that sufficiently answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was kind of a waste of a question. I'm going to be honest. Like, I far from me to defend Charlie Kirk, but ask it. There's so many. Oh my God. There's better questions. You have an opportunity to ask a question at the Cambridge Union, and you ask it about that. I don't know. I do think that was a bit of a waste of a question, but Charlie's answer was interesting.
Our next question is from James Loveridge from Anglo-Ruskin University.
So, firstly, thank you for coming here, Charlie. It's nice to meet you. So my question is, I am a Conservative, and I did back Trump in 2024, but I'm troubled that the GOP refuses to hold him accountable for his personal and legal failings. And how can we claim to stand for moral values and the Constitution while excusing behaviour that we condemn from the left? Isn't it the hypocrisy undermining our credibility, especially with the next generation?
You got to give examples here.
What specifically do you have issue with?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good question.
The countless things that he's done.
The what?
Stormy Daniels. The bus interview that he put down to locker room talk. His multiple legal values, filings.
It makes it hard to believe this dude voted for Trump. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know any Trump supporter that actually cares about the Stormy Daniels case or the Access Hollywood tapes. Like, at this point, that's just old news. I mean, it's awful to say that, the president paying off a porn star and cheating on his wife who just gave birth is like history, but it basically is, or him bragging about sexually assaulting women in exactly the way he's accused, mind you.
And what would you like to see them do? And you voted for this man. So,
No, I can't vote for him.
Whatever. You said you voted, or whatever. I don't know.
Why do you back
I don't
him
know.
or
You said you
something?
supported him, so
Yeah.
is that correct? Maybe I'm putting words in
No,
your mouth.
that's
You
correct.
supported
yeah,
him. Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying that. I supported him on some of his policies and him, but a lot of conservatives, I'm not saying you personally, but a lot of conservatives refuse to call him out or critique him on anything and will ignore that straight away.
It's a bad
I mean,
question.
I critique him. He's a friend of mine. I might critique him. I don't think Canada should be the 51st state. We have enough liberals in America.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, cheers.
It's a bad question. Bad question.
Our next question is from Kai Bevan at Trinity Hall.
How long are these? Are these all questions that they had? I thought they were like long form.
Right, so thank you for coming, Charlie. My question to you, I'm a medical student, and so I'm going to throw out the big A word. I know you get asked about it a lot, but I want to hear from you what your opinion is on abortion.
Life begins at conception.
But about abortion specifically, why?
That's not an answer to it. That's not what is your opinion on abortion? Life begins at conception. Okay, you just you made a descriptive claim that nothing follows from that. Of course, he's going to say that therefore that means that abortion is wrong, but it's not an answer to the question. You know what I mean? If someone asked me my position on, like, I don't know, like genuine murder, and I'm like, people are alive. That's not an answer to the question, okay?
Why do you think abortion's wrong specifically?
Well, you agree murder is wrong?
I agree. Okay, so this is where we get to the question, right? Because what is it about murder you say is wrong? Like, why is murder wrong?
Well, because it's a human being, not just because it has consciousness or because it's of a certain age, because it's a human.
And what is it that gives human being this moral worth?
Not its consciousness necessarily.
Well, that answer
I
the question.
didn't say it's consciousness.
I know that I can imagine it because it is a human being because it has a soul.
Circular. Oh, soul.
And what is this soul? Where does this come from? This idea that it's...
Exactly. I mean, again, the Greeks postulated that it is the entirety of your being. Okay, you guys can laugh. I mean, it's true. I mean, every civilization has had a different belief, but agreed upon ethical monotheism, which is the creed of the West and what the birth certificate of my country articulates, is that every human being is more than just matter. It's more than just a clump of cells, but it also has an invisible element to you that will live beyond you.
Sounds like magic.
Fine,
to me.
so, I mean, can you say that comes from the Bible, or where else do you get that from?
Ethical monotheism, which is the creed of the West. And again, the Declaration of Independence mentions God 4 times. The founders were explicitly believed, not in a secular morality, but a divinely given one, of at least this idea that there is a God and you are not him. And let me ask you, what is the first stage of human?
First off, the Declaration of Independence is not our founding document. The Constitution is. And religion is only mentioned in the Constitution twice. First time is to say that there shall be no establishment of a government religion within the First Amendment's Establishment Clause. And the second time, I believe it's in Article 6, where it says that there shall be no religious test for office. So the supreme law of the land, which is not the Declaration of Independence, does not state that there is any basis by which the U.S. is founded as a Christian nation. In fact, John Adams made it very clear that there is in no sense was our country founded on as a Christian nation. So it's just not the case. Is it true that some founding fathers, many of them were religious and derived some of their morality from that? Of course. It doesn't follow from that our country is inherently a Christian country or religious country. Like, no, it was founded on Enlightenment ideals, on ideals pushing back against the religiosity, against the worship of one entity or man, whether it be King George III or God.
Development.
So
first stage of human
this
development.
is the thing, right? We can take it from the sperm being generated in the father and the oocyte being generated in the mother, right? They fuse at birth, conception, sorry. The only thing that happens at conception is these 2 cells fuse.
No,
Right?
DNA is created. A zygote.
DNA is not created.
A DNA, no, that's not true. The DNA,
Charlie,
DNA coding at the zygote. Hold on, time out.
I'll let you finish.
Does a zygote have a unique marker?
Charlie,
Does a zygote have a unique
Jesus
marker?
Christ, let him
have
finish.
But answer it, yes or no.
Charlie-
Does a zygote have a unique marker?
define a unique marker.
Meaning, can you differentiate the DNA coding between the mother and the zygote if you examine it under a deoxyribonucleic acid analysis? Can you?
Only purely because the addition comes from the father.
Also, if we want to be clear on this, he's just saying the genetic code is different between the mother and the zygote. The DNA is different between the mother and the ova because those are haploid cells. They have half of the DNA. So it's actually different. It is different. The DNA is different. It's not the full set of DNA that every other somatic cell in the individual's body has. So if it's just a different genetic code, then I guess every sperm and egg are individual lives that should be protected. But of course, that's not the case.
Oh, so it is something different.
Charlie, DNA is not created. DNA is not created. You have, the father has his own genome, the mother has her own genome. They fuse. This is why you have the same characteristics, similar ones to your mother, similar ones to your father. That's why you have similar characteristics to your siblings. DNA is not created, right? So when you ask me, where does a human being come from? I can say to you, it starts at conception, but all conception is these two cells joining, right? But these two cells were created, the mother cells were created long before, they were created when she was a fetus. So there's none of this DNA being produced, right? So we can't establish. The only thing that happens at conception is these two cells fuse. Now this idea that means that for some reason suddenly that moral worth comes in, but it wasn't there before when you had these two cells who had half the DNA. Sure. But suddenly there's a
Correct. Yes, something magical happens at that.
It's not magical, Charlie. We know about this.
Well, hold on.
That's one of the viral clips I saw. That's pretty good. It's not magic.
I promise you, I'm not trying to score points. I'm not trying to score points on you. This is genuine.
We call it the miracle of life for a reason. We've not been able to yet replicate human life development outside of the womb.
We call it the miracle of life because yes, it's something beautiful. The ability to form a new.
Magical.
It's not. You say magical as in it's beautiful. It's an incredible thing that happens, of course. But it's not incredible in the sense we don't know what's going on. There's no new DNA coming out of nowhere.
Hold on, but time out. Isn't there a separate DNA though than the mother?
Yes, from the father.
Okay, yes, but it's not the father's DNA either. A new coding is created.
Charlie,
you are a blend of the two. And so when did your life begin?
Okay, so
when did your life begin?
I mean, again, this comes from what you define as where life starts. You can say life starts at conception, but I'm telling you, I believe that's just an arbitrary point, right? That's just the moment these two cells fuse. Now, you say about this mother thing. So the way DNA is arranged in a cell is it's arranged in chromosomes. Chromosomes are paired up, so you have one from the mother, one from the father, typically, in a healthy individual, right? Now, you can take those maternal chromosomes out and you can find that this is who the person's mother is, and you can do the same with the father. Now, the reason you are different to your mother and father is because some of those chromosomes express genes that are different from each other, and so those genes interact, and that's what gives rise to you, right? But there's no space for any kind of moral framework to come into that until you consider that a human being is capable of consciousness and of suffering. But if you take that out of the equation, the fact that these two DNA, whatever they call molecules, right? These two DNA molecules are fusing. That does not suddenly flip a switch that attributes moral worth to that individual.
It's true. I mean, it doesn't just follow descriptively from that claim.
I mean, I'm just saying, I'm not trying to score points. I'm trying to understand.
By what moral standard do you believe that?
I believe that if an individual is capable of suffering, then it's wrong. Now, can I explain my opinion on abortion, just so you can understand? I would agree, as many reasonable people would, that at 9 months, it's unreasonable to expect someone to get an abortion, right? Unless you have some extreme circumstances. But for an elective abortion seems a bit radical to me.
Well, sure, and that's just not happening. You know what I mean? Like, abortions that happen within the third trimester are almost, if not entirely, exclusively due to medical complications or threats to the mother's life. Women are not like satanic evil beings who just decide they want to get pregnant all the way up until birth and then just decide to, like, kill the fully formed child. Like, no, of course not. So, no, it's like, that is less than 1%, way less than 1% of cases.
But it also seems radical to say that a woman who has just, the cells have just fused, to deny her of an abortion also seems wrong to me, because that zygote is not capable of suffering, as far as we know.
So you're, by what moral standard? Is that just your opinion? Where did you get that moral standard from?
Here we go.
Because suffering is a bad thing. We all know suffering is a bad thing. That's an objective fact, right?
Hold on. So you do believe in objective morality.
I believe that suffering is an objectively negative
So if you can't feel it, is it okay?
What do you mean if you can't?
You can't feel the pain, is it okay to inflict the pain?
In the sense that if no one's suffering from it, if you have a scenario where nobody is suffering from something, then yes, of course. Something is only a moral question if it affects someone's well-being.
I would agree with that.
So let me just make sure I understand this correctly. That if it doesn't affect their well-being, so dementia patients that don't know who they are or where they're from, can we execute dementia patients because they're confused about their well-being?
Can you imagine a scenario?
Or Alzheimer's patients.
Charlie,
Alzheimer's patients don't really know much about anything. Can we schedule them for execution because they can't technically suffer?
Now respond. So can you imagine a scenario where we lived in a society where we killed people when they suffered from dementia, were incapable of suffering, and we killed them, right? It's not a scenario that involves an absence of suffering. There's still suffering involved. Imagine you grow up thinking, my dad could be killed at any moment because he's going to get dementia. Imagine living your life thinking, I could get dementia and suddenly I'd be killed by my state.
Imagine a world where you slaughter 1 million babies every year in America.
Charlie!
There we go.
Charlie, it's
nice pivot. Look, that's such a shameless pivot. He got just completely obliterated on that last point because his dementia example was just asinine. So he goes to just this ridiculous, morally loaded question. Imagine we slaughter 1 million babies. When literally the entire contention here is they're not equally morally valuable to a baby. A single-celled zygote is not.
That's the problem.
Hold on. If it's a forcible removal from the umbilical cord of another human life.
From the umbilical cord?
We have clarity but not agreement.
Hold on. There isn't an umbilical cord at one cell. When you take the abortion pill, there's no umbilical cord present. What? It has to develop. You just get rid of it. What?
Biologically, you know that your entire coding began at conception. Your coding.
No, that's
your
what,
uniqueness.
That's what I'm denying. I disagree with that.
Okay, when those two cells fused together, to use your terminology,
yes,
that is where the process of
scientifically accepted terminology.
In the interest of time, can we bring this question to a close?
The process of human development objectively begins at that moment. Therefore, those human beings are deserving of human rights. We keep going, or do you want to?
No, thank you. Yeah, you can finish.
The process of development begins from the moment the sperm is being generated in the father, the moment the eggs are being generated in the mother. To say that suddenly the moral worth switches on when they fuse doesn't make any sense.
It is an arbitrary point.
A point
it makes perfect sense because that is when your journey as a human being. When the sperm and egg were separate, you were not yet a fused human being. You were not created uniquely.
DNA existed.
Any image.
Your DNA existed. I thought.
Well, no, the parts of your DNA existed. Your DNA did not exist. It's like saying that we have a full car just because we have all the parts. It was not yet put together until conception happens.
The car wasn't a car until it was done being built. At conception is when all of the parts or the blueprint is there. This is a terrible analogy. This works against Charlie's argument.
The zygote was formed. Thank you. I think we have to get.
Can we move on to the next question, please? Thank you.
All right, I want to comment on that a little bit. I mean, so this idea that we should ascribe complete personhood at conception runs into so many barriers or counterintuitive results super quickly. One of them would be that miscarriage seems to be the largest natural disaster in history. Okay, 50 to 80% of fertilized eggs do not make it to term, are not delivered. A lot of them just get flushed out in the woman's next period cycle because it's not able to implant within the endometrium. There's a lot of different things. It would mean that women who have IUDs are murderers. It would mean that they're doing something seriously wrong. Even taking something like Plan B does something seriously wrong, because not only does it possibly prevent conception, but if conception does occur, it prevents it from implanting within the uterine lining. So that would mean that that's the case. There's really weird things that come about from it. I mean, we just don't, there's the famous burning fertility clinic experiment. If there's 5 embryos or one baby and you can only save one, which one are you going to save? No one views fertilized eggs as fully formed human beings. So many our society would be ever changed if that were like IVF would be outlawed. It would be irresponsible of you to have sex at a certain point because conception could accidentally occur, and you'd have to do everything in your power to ensure that the fetus implanted, because if you didn't, you'd be guilty of child neglect. Like, we would have to give certain rights to the fetus. Like, if we're going to give it the right to life, it would seem to get all the same rights within the Constitution. Presumably, it would get the right to due process. What the fuck does that mean? Does that mean we can't arrest pregnant women because by default you'd be arresting an innocent human being with a right to due process? Like, there's so many things that just counterintuitive conclusions that come off of it. I mean, I think the largest one is just that miscarriage is like the worst natural disaster ever, despite the fact that none of the victims if we want to call them that, can suffer. They're not capable of suffering. Yet, if this is the largest, moral wrong that's being done, why do we care about anything else when, like, so many miscarriages are happening at that single cell stage? So, yeah.
Thank you. Our fourth question tonight is from Rudy Ellis-Jones from Emmanuel College.
All right, here we go.
Hello, thank you for coming to today's talk. So my question, as someone studying archaeology and biological anthropology, I've learned that moral codes and social norms have always been fluid, shaped by time, culture, power. So many ancient and recent societies embrace same-sex relationships and even the idea of third genders well before Western conservatism even existed. So when you claim that modern conservative values represent some kind of universal, objective moral truth, like you said on your chair over there, aren't you just defending a selective, historically recent ideology that erases most of human history and targets people who have always been part of it?
No, but can you point to me of a... And maybe you can educate me. Can you point to me a great power that endorsed same-sex marriage? Not cohabitation, but marriage.
Ancient Mesopotamia.
As marriage. As recognized.
As marriage that exists.
Recognized by the state.
100%.
And how did that work out for them?
It worked out perfectly fine. It was an accepted norm of society.
Okay, I still think it's wrong.
Okay. Swiftly moving on. So you said
It was a stupid line of questioning. Like, you know what I mean? It was stupid because there's no bearing on his position. Because if you can find a society in which it worked, Charlie still thinks it's wrong. So he's just trying to get a gotcha that has no bearing on his position. It's ridiculous.
it was based on scripture, and you believe that there are moral, objective, universal truths.
Yes, there are.
So
murder is wrong today, and murder was wrong 2,000 years ago.
Right. Okay. Fair. That's not same sex, but fair. I see your point. But
there are moral truths that are transcendent of time, place, and matter.
Okay. But so just to clarify, you believe that this is in the Bible. This is laid out in the Bible that man shall not sleep with man, and so therefore
it's also repeated throughout the New Testament as well. In the book of Matthew, Jesus reaffirms the biblical standard for marriage.
Okay. So I'm going to make two very, very quick points. So the first, so if we look at the Old Testament in isolation, just to start off with as an example. So let's look at Exodus 35:2, which suggests that if you work on the Sabbath, you should be put to death. If you look at Leviticus 11:7, it suggests that if you have pork, you should be put to death. Let me finish, I'll be done. If you plant two crops side by side, you should be stoned by your entire village. If you wear a suit, which you are wearing now, that contains two different fibers intertwined into the same jacket, you should be burned at the stake by your own mother. Now, following that rationale, in Leviticus 18:22, when it states that man shall not sleep with man, why aren't we burning ourselves at the stake as well? Why aren't we stoning ourselves to death?
It's a terrible book. I mean, it's a terrible book to get your morals from for that exact reason.
Do you care to address my main contention that Christ affirmed biblical marriage in the book of Matthew? And can you tell me the difference between the ceremonial, the moral, and the ritual law? And then finally, also, tell me about Christianity, the difference between the new and the old covenant, or are you just going to cherry pick certain verses of ancient Israel that do not apply to new Christianity?
No, fair. I completely agree. So we'll look at 2 points then. So firstly, if we look at the Old Testament, we can see the kind of inconsistencies there. We've already touched upon that, right? That makes sense. Secondly, you mentioned the point of Jesus and Christ. He never mentioned anything to do with homosexuality at all.
Well, hold on a second. No, he affirmed biblical marriage as one man and one woman. He said a man shall leave his
Romans,
father's
right?
house.
In the New Testament.
No, in Matthew, that is not correct. I believe
In the New Testament.
In the New Testament, well, Romans is also in the New Testament. Secondly, in Romans 1, the Apostle Paul talks negatively about homosexuality.
I don't give a shit about
explicitly.
this.
Also, homosexuality is repeated in the book of Titus and in the book of Jude as not being favorable as the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Not even talking about the Old Testament verses. There are 3 types of the 613 Levitical laws, and you know, of course, in your own way, cherry picked some of them. We do not live under the ceremonial, we do not live under the ritual, but we do live under the moral. There's only 10 of the moral that we as Christians believe we're bound to. Some believe 9, which of course is the Decalogue. And so none of those that you mentioned, we as Christians believe.
So you just cherry pick which ones you follow and which ones you don't. I don't give a shit. You're gonna make this arbitrary distinction between ceremonial and ritual laws. Okay, cool. Then fine. Then the homosexuality verses also only applied to the ancient Israelites. Why do you get to choose which ones you live by?
That we live under. However, we do look at what Christ articulated as the biblical standard of marriage. And we can also look to church tradition for this as well. And the church has had a tradition for well over 2,000 years. Even myself as a Protestant acknowledges that tradition is marriage between one man and one woman.
An unfair point, but okay, say we put aside the Old Testament for now. We'll put that aside and the inconsistencies there, and we'll look purely at the New Testament following your rationale, okay? Now, when you say that Christ lays specifically, and the New Testament states specifically that man shall not sleep with man, I'd like to point out a linguistic error on that point.
I did not say that. I said the biblical marriage was affirmed, and then Romans 1 did talk negatively about the action of homosexuality.
But ultimately,
that is a fact.
That affirmation comes from 8 lines in there that suggest that man shall not sleep with man.
Yes, of course, yes. The Old Testament and New Testament harmonize one another, but Christ brought it to a different level, a different covenant, and a different moral teaching. It wasn't
So
just
boring.
enough to
Can we
say
move on? I
that
don't
you
care
shall,
about the
you
Bible.
know, eye for eye, so that you shall turn the other cheek, that you shall love your enemy. Christ's moral standard was much more even elevated than that of the Israelites and the Hebrews.
Well, I'm going to ask you whose Bible, okay? Now, your Bible that you use currently is written in the English language, right? Correct?
Yeah, the King James Version, yes, thanks to Tyndale.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's written in the English language, which in itself is only, say, 500 years old. Now, but the Christianity in itself, say, is 2,000 years old or even older, yeah? Correct? Now, which means that the Bible was originally written not in English, but in ancient
Koine Greek.
Huh?
In Koine Greek.
Yeah, correct. Now, if we look at the Greek terminology of man...
Yes, and Jesus spoke Aramaic. You could translate things, you acknowledge that.
Well, we translate things, but translations are linguistically ambiguous. As a former classicist, I know that language can't be translated directly. So, for example, if we look at the translation of certain words into man, so I've got 2 words here. So I've got malakoi, which means essentially soft, which isn't necessarily directly saying a gay man. And then we've got, oh God, how do I say that? Arsenokoitai,
Yeah.
which essentially means prostitutes. Now, if we look at things linguistically,
Is it
we can pick
prostitutes,
apart the
though?
Bible and say that actually, it wasn't saying man shall not sleep with man, it's saying man shall not sleep with prostitutes, which is an entirely different linguistic thing.
I'm not even
That's-
getting into Leviticus, though.
But no,
my contention is completely New Testament focused.
This isn't Leviticus.
Well, but you said man shall not speak of the man. So you're talking about Romans 1.
Well, okay, these words are used throughout the
Right, well,
entire Bible
actually,
and
in
the
Romans
original
1, it was
text.
actually
Old
women
Testament.
sleeping with women. So you got your verses wrong. In Romans 1, Paul is prophesying about the end of the world, and he's saying that in the end times, woman will like with woman like, and
I don't
man
care.
will. I think it might say man will like, men like. You have to get the verses specifically, but it is agreed upon, and you can agree. This is why tradition is important, and I even say this as a Protestant, is that we believe that Scripture is very important, but also look to tradition. Church tradition has had an unbroken chain affirming matrimony, holy matrimony being one man, one woman,
It had a tradition of affirming slavery. Tradition is bullshit. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that things have always been that way. For a long time, women were property. I don't care. I don't care what the book says. I don't care what the tradition is. I care whether it's good or bad, whether it causes suffering. I don't care. It's ridiculous.
As a non-Catholic, I'm glad that Pope Leo has reaffirmed in the last couple of days. And so I'm not even sure your contention, your point. Are you saying that the Bible doesn't affirm marriage as one man, one woman? Or are you saying church tradition doesn't affirm marriage one man,
The
one woman?
Bible doesn't affirm.
Okay,
But clearly doesn't affirm.
That is complete
It's a linguistic
nonsense.
error. But it's not. It's a linguistic error. And
But
it's
again,
debated.
but Christ our Lord, which is the standard, he affirms this idea that you will leave your father's home. Going back to Genesis 12 and this idea of Abraham leaving his father's home, and you will cleave to your wife. That it'll be called one. In fact, this idea of a new...
Hold on. Just because in the Bible it uses a heterosexual marriage is not the same thing as condemning homosexuality. Just because you use one example of a marriage doesn't mean you condemn others. Like, you know what I mean? So I think this is a stupid argument. Now, granted, I think the Bible probably does condemn homosexuality, and that's a bad thing, and that's why we should throw the Bible out. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to soften the Bible for Christianity. I think we should throw it out the window. I think that it's a terrible book. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't. Sure, are there some good morals in it, and does Jesus teach you to be like a good person? Yeah, but it, like, especially the Old Testament is just like a genocidal maniac God, just like exacting his revenge on anyone who dare question him. Like, so I don't care. We can get all the goods from the Bible without any of the bads associated with it. So
creation, which is something that is then used by the Apostle Paul to describe the church of Christ and the bride of the church, and the church being the bride of Christ with Jesus. So I'm not even sure your contention. It is.
Yeah, but you're just avoiding my point. I'm saying the Bible that we have today is 100% a translation, and a translation
I acknowledge that.
Ambiguous.
And well, hold on. But what about specifically in Matthew or in the book of Romans? And but in order for you to be correct, you mean the church fathers translated it wrong when they were within like 50 years of this. In order for your contention to be correct, you have to say that the early church fathers that wrote the early letters to the church, they were translating it wrong, and the tradition they established was wrong. So by then we can lean on tradition and scripture. So when you get tradition plus scripture, you get something that is authentic, that is real, and that is verifiable.
I've already highlighted that tradition does not align with scripture. We've gone back thousands of years to ancient Mesopotamia.
But understand, but at the time they all spoke Greek, they wrote Greek, and they spoke Aramaic. So for example, when they were writing the early Gospels, the synoptic Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they were obviously writing in Greek. They knew that language. So in Matthew, when they were writing Greek, and then the early church fathers knew Greek and adopted that as church tradition, we have a 2,000 unbroken chain.
Skip this section.
I think you would irrefutably say that it was the teachings of Christ for one man and one woman, because the church tradition has been unbroken for 2,000 years, and they derived it from scripture of that original language.
You can't argue that. That makes sense. I mean, if we agree to disagree, then why don't we look at biology?
So you know better than the church fathers?
No, I don't. I'm not saying I know better than the church fathers. What I'm saying is, linguistically, there is undeniably an error. Regardless of what you say, that is
our lens, maybe, but not from the people when they were making these traditions.
I agree. They may have got that right, but that may not have been their original meaning. What we're saying is the meaning has been warped over time because societal and cultural context, such as the British Empire.
Can we start bring this question to a close, please?
It can be, but that is why tradition matters, because the tradition, they understood the context.
Tradition is context dependent.
Well, yes and no, because of course tradition is, but if the tradition lasts for 2,000 years, then we look back as to how did they get to that conclusion, how did they reach that verdict, and if that verdict is in alignment with what we see in Scripture, it means that their verdict was correct in Scripture.
They never reached that verdict, as I have historically pointed out.
In all of the major church councils, it was very...
The modern day.
Well, no, I'm talking about in like 300 and 400 and 500. The original
which in the scale of 2,000 years is nothing.
No, but they set this unbroken chain. We've had an unbroken chain and a course that says that marriage is one man and one woman. The church has never wavered on this.
Noted by the British Empire under British form of Christianity.
I'm talking all the way back to like 200 or 300. The idea of biblical Christianity goes back to the
I don't care about any of this.
Church, when it was a scattered, persecuted church, well before King Justinian and well before the Eastern Roman Empire, well before mass conversions. When it was a persecuted church, the church believed in one man, one woman, and because they got it from the scripture itself. Do we want to keep going, or
can we move on to the next question, please? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness! Thank goodness we're done. Oh my God! It's exhausting.
Thank you. Our next question is from Damsith Wimalasena from Lucy Cavendish College. Thank you.
All right. I saw some clips of this guy. It's pretty good.
Hello, Charlie. Thank you for being here. Just before I start with my question, I wanted to address something you said earlier on sort of Western Christian values being the reason for the abolishment of slavery globally. I'm not sure whether you know this. I've seen you repeating this quite often. I'm a practicing Buddhist, and it was actually Buddhism, Buddhist emperors, Emperor Ashoka of India, who first abolished slavery globally. So I would ask you to sort of look at other sort of...
I will look into that. He did it globally? They had that much, the Buddhists had that much span of influence?
Within India.
Okay, I'll look into it. Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, my first question, or my only question is, you've advocated and applauded the reducing and removing of public funding for universities on the grounds they promote ideological biases. Given that universities play a critical role in driving national innovation, research, and upward mobility, especially through federally funded grants. How do you reconcile this position with the broader societal value that higher education institutes offer?
Well, they can, but in Harvard's case, for example, who's getting their funding pulled, they have a $50 billion endowment. Just so we are clear, in pounds, that would be like what, 42 billion, 45 billion? I mean, I'm trying to learn the conversion rate here. I mean, it's an extraordinary amount of money. They can either use their endowments to fund it, and if you have certain behavior and certain practices, then you should not get federal funding. Harvard is in direct violation of the United States Supreme Court fair admissions case, which says you cannot discriminate people based on the color of their skin.
They're not.
Go ahead.
But isn't the whole point of it, you can't use endowments like that.
Yeah.
The point of
They can.
No, you
the
can't.
point of an
Endowment
endowment is to
invested.
manage a fund through perpetuity.
Yes.
Cambridge has an endowment, and that endowment allows professorships to be funded to a
You do realize that an endowment isn't just a pile of cash, right? It also includes the investments. It also includes the assets. It's the same thing with net worth. Like these are not, it's not like Harvard just has $50 billion sitting around. They got a lot of cash. I'm not saying Harvard is not like loaded, but it's not like they just have $50 billion. Like that's just not how endowments work.
for research into sciences. That's the whole point of an
Well, you just said,
endowment.
hold on, you just said it funds research into sciences. That's what they should do with their monstrosity of an endowment.
Yeah, but the endowment is, you can't.
The interest alone on their endowment could fund the entire research and development budget of most Ivy League schools. They have a $50 billion endowment. Even like a podunk money manager in America can earn a 7 to 10% investment in the markets the last couple of years. That's $5 billion of returns that endowment could then reinvest in whatever they want. Instead, Harvard has become a hedge fund with a radical school attached. And I think that's very wrong for U.S. taxpayers to continue to subsidize.
Hold on, you can criticize the like commercialization of higher education and say that these are working like, you know, they're fundamentally for-profit institutions that are tax exempt. That's fine. But what you're trying to do is just say that they need to teach your brand of ideology, which is wrong. So I don't really care. You also like support hedge funds and support billionaires. So to lever this critique against Harvard, like, yeah, they're just like a bunch of billionaires. Okay, Charlie, like those are all your friends. That's who funds you. Like what?
It's not just Harvard. You've called on colleges being a scam. You've constantly attacked higher education institutes. You've attacked liberal arts as a scam. For example, like a lot of conservatives, Peter Thiel studied philosophy at Stanford. Ronald Reagan studied sociology. A lot of them did study liberal arts, and you keep undermining these august institutions, which have provided a lot for society. Like society's backbones have been universities and higher learning institutes, and yet you keep attacking them.
Well, they used to be largely, but again, I don't want to speak too much about this country, but in America, they don't represent fundamental American values. You know, Peter Thiel, after he graduated Stanford, wrote an entire book criticizing college and then paying people not to go to college. So Peter Thiel, who spoke at this very school, and you guys had a great conversation with him, do you know that he believes college is such a scam? He would pay people $100,000 a year for 20 years straight not to go to college. So not exactly a good argument in your favor. Peter Thiel, who got a philosophy degree, made billions of dollars, and has now forked over tens of millions of dollars for people not to go to U.S. universities and colleges.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's not just Peter Thiel.
I know, but you mentioned him, I didn't. But to complete the point is that...
Clarence Thomas went to, did liberal arts.
Look, in America, there are far too many people going to college. We need people to become welders, electricians, people that work with their hands. There is a major trade deficit problem in the United States. We have 11 million well-paying jobs that we cannot find enough labor
Always
for.
gonna be a
And
trade
instead, we have a
deficit
lot
with
of
the
people
United
going to university to go study North African lesbian poetry. It might sound good, but it doesn't necessarily, A, either development, the content, the character, or the development of the soul, and B, it does not necessarily also give you the skills necessary. Some college is good for you. I'm a big proponent of Hillsdale College.
Guys, can you please be quiet?
I believe Hillsdale College is America's greatest college.
Yeah, of
and I'm a
course
big
you do. Do you
proponent-
guys know what Hillsdale College is? It's the right-wing indoctrination factory. It's insane. I made the mistake of one time clicking on their website, and now I get emails from their college president talking about how evil the Biden administration is and how they need to like get the corrupt leftists out of power. That is not a college. That is just a right-wing indoctrination factory. So these people are not in favor of open inquiry, free expression, and like institutional neutrality. They just want to be the ones who control the institutions, and they're mad that they don't. It's that simple.
That, but I would ask a question. In your own words, what do you believe the purpose of college is?
It's critical engagement. But coming back to your point on lesbian poetry or whatever.
North African lesbian poetry.
North African lesbian poetry.
Very
So in the
specific,
morning,
wow.
I actually had a lecture on development policy. And one of the key authors on sort of development economics is Nussbaum, who talks about how liberal arts sort of engages you critically. And one could argue, even North African lesbian poetry, I don't think that's a degree. I think that's just a module within a degree.
Yeah, it is. Just a class.
Maybe.
It is. You don't know because you don't go to
That
college, Charlie.
makes
The fact you don't
engage.
know shows how rotten to the core universities have become.
You're taking one example and telling conservatives and hordes of young people that college is a scam. College isn't a scam. I mean, I took my mum down to a pub just down the road where Watson and Crick announced DNA.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, wait one second.
If college is a scam, then DNA wouldn't have been discovered. With cancer research.
Yes, hold on a second. Yes, you're right. At this specific university, you guys split the atom. You had Sir Isaac Newton. You had some of the greatest minds of the West. I don't know about what's happening here, and I'm not going to criticize it. But at most colleges in the West, they've gone away from places of inquiry and appreciation of what is good and what is beautiful and into this incessant oppression Olympics of trying
Okay, all right, I need to interject right here. Should the purpose of college be to develop an appreciation for what is good? No, that's not the point of college. The point of college is not to create like grateful people who are just so grateful that they're in this country. Like, no, you were just trying to reverse indoctrinate. You're trying to indoctrinate people. You were the ones who were trying to indoctrinate. This is why I say that almost every conservative accusation like against the left is just an admission. They're trying to indoctrinate. The purpose of college is not to make you love America, unlike what Charlie will tell you.
deconstruct the core canon that is our birth certificate. I don't know if that's happening here. It's certainly...
That's not true, though.
In America, it is objectively true, okay?
That isn't true.
Again, no, first of all, they removed Western civilization as a core course in Stanford in the 1990s. They tried to bring it back with petitions, and the university said, no, teaching Western civilization is racist. Shakespeare is not taught at major... let me finish. Shakespeare is not taught at major universities across America because it's deemed as racist.
False. Just objectively false. I'm sorry. Like, if you take any major English course, you will read Shakespeare. I read so much Shakespeare in high school. And granted, I didn't take any English courses in college, directly, like specifically English or classics, but absolutely they're part of the curriculum. Like, what are you talking about? Charlie's taking this one example of how some people critique things as being racist as like we shouldn't study them at all, or we shouldn't even mention them. Like, no, there's no major institution where you can like get an English degree or something and like never read Shakespeare. Like, absolutely not.
Talked to some students earlier in the English department, and they said, hey, I'm studying Shakespeare. I said, that's refreshing because in a lot of U.S. schools, they don't teach Shakespeare because he's called racist. You would be surprised at how wretched to the core some of these colleges have become in America.
My God.
If you look at the Global Innovation Index, America, which is predominantly a lot of their majors are in humanities and liberal arts, they're number 2 on the Global Innovation Index. China is somewhere near 13. If you look at every metric, Fortune 1000 CEOs, 40% did humanities and liberal arts. There is a value in liberal arts, yet you're criticizing it.
And I'm going to keep on criticizing it. Also, the vast majority of liberal arts graduates do not respect freedom of speech. That is an empirical poll. They increasingly do not have reverence or gratitude for the United States of America.
There we go.
They don't care about the core values of the U.S. Constitution.
There we go.
If you want to go to college, that's fine. But in our country,
well, let me finish.
40% of kids that enter college do not graduate. The kids that do graduate, half of them end up getting jobs that do not require...
Okay, fine. First off, okay, cool. People who get liberal arts degrees don't have this unwavering reverence for America. Cool. You know what that means? They got fucking educated. They learned about America. You should not worship America. Absolutely, you should not worship your country. America's done so much fucked up shit, continues to do fucked up shit. Like what... Charlie wants people to graduate from college and just think America is amazing and wonderful because ignorance is bliss. And when you learn more things, you tend to get more dissatisfied because there's so much fucked up shit America has done. I'm not saying that America is terrible and rotten to the core. Okay, I am a proud American and I will continue to be a proud American because I will challenge us to live up to our founding promises. Okay? But that doesn't mean that I'm going to have this unwavering reverence for this country and just be uncritical of it. Okay, that's what education should have you do. But that's why Charlie's against it. They're against education because they don't want free thinkers. They don't want people who are questioning these ideologies. It's that simple.
Or any sort of college degree. There are all these made-up degrees. In America, I know it's different than the experience you might be having here. Your tutoring system here is objectively great. I'm glad you guys have it. The class sizes in America are 400 to 500 students, sometimes per introductory course, to go hundreds of thousands of dollars in a...
It depends on the course. I mean, a lot of those are introductory courses, specifically in STEM, and in those types of courses, especially at large universities, they do have like TAs and tutors who help out with that. That's not a sign that it's a scam. Now, granted, I went to a smaller liberal arts school specifically so I could have more one-on-one conversations and interactions with professors. However, that doesn't mean that, like, especially for those intro courses, that large class sizes are necessarily a bad thing. So
study things that don't matter to find jobs that do not exist. And so let me just make one final point, is that, of course, some people should be going to college, but generally in the United States of America, it has become a racket of debt, it has become a burden, and a place where we're actually not putting our best and brightest into the job field itself to be equipped for the jobs of the future. Instead, we have a lot of baristas at Starbucks with philosophy degrees.
You also mentioned indoctrination. As per the Oxford Dictionary's definition of indoctrination, it means that you take a belief and you can't critically observe that belief. Turning Point USA has over 30,000 chapters, 3,000 chapters across US universities. So are you arguing that students, including conservatives, lack the critical thinking skills to sort of decide political ideologies, political beliefs, that they're so dumbfounded that they can't decide for themselves what's right and what's wrong, and that your whole premise is on the fact that students like us, we lack critical thought in deciding what is taught in schools?
Again, I'm not...
Here we go. I want to... Let me just steelman the position that Charlie would give, because that's a terrible argument. Like, I don't... You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to defend Charlie Kirk, but that was just a bad argument. Let's, for sake of argument, say that there was indoctrination happening on campuses. Charlie thinks that the Turning Point chapters are the ones that are fighting back against the indoctrination. So just because there is, quote unquote, or we're assuming that there would be indoctrination in this scenario, doesn't mean every single student would be being indoctrinated. Charlie thinks these are the warriors, the fighters who are fighting against the indoctrination. So, like, it's such a weird question.
Using Cambridge as the school that I think of, but in America, we have millions of people that go to these massive state schools that have humanities departments that are not reading the great books, that do not have a tutoring system, that are unfortunately laced with the most anti-Western thought imaginable. I don't really quite following what one thing has to do with the other, why 3,000 chapters has something to do with your indictment. Maybe you can clarify, but I think we're out of time.
You can clarify, but then we'll move on.
In general, colleges should be a place that lift you up to what is good, true, and beautiful, to study the great things that have been, to develop your soul and develop your character. Character in Greek literally means like tattoo, to etch within you. Far too often, colleges create ungrateful, pessimistic, and nihilistic revolutionaries that want to tear down what was before and instead have no alternative to build the future, and the West is suffering because of it. Thank you very much.
There we go. Yeah, So that's what he does, is he basically says that these people need to be grateful. The problem is the more you learn about America, the more you learn that it is not true that we were always the good guys. Very often we're the bad guys. So if the college is creating people who are very pessimistic, now pessimism versus optimism is different, but people who are, very critical of the United States, all that means is they actually learned, like, real history, like, not whitewashed versions. So Charlie wants to indoctrinate. Charlie wants to indoctrinate students to just believe that America is great, and none of the criticisms that might suggest otherwise, when there is a lot to be said there.
Thank you. I disagree, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next question is from Archie McIntosh at Jesus College.
All right.
It's good to meet you, Charlie. I hope you can understand first rule. I'm a little nervous. There's a very real chance I could wake up tomorrow, front page of YouTube. Charlie Kirk owns man bun idiot with facts and logic. So
destroys.
Yeah, destroys. Okay, so my question is, I agree that stable monogamous relationships often produce the best outcomes for society, but if that structure really works for everyone, why do we consistently see societies, once they become safer and more prosperous, move away from traditional monogamy? And why do so many marriages still end in divorce, even among people who generally try to make it work? And just one final framing there. If you believe in free markets because they are decentralized and they adapt to reality without top-down control, and given the individual ability to form healthy long-term pair bonds vary significantly with factors like genetics and ecologically calibrated attachment styles, why do you reject top-down control in economics, but not extend that same rejection to human behavior in terms of marriage?
Okay, so the first one, the second law of thermodynamics answers your question, is that it's the law of decay. Societies tend to decay against the roots that created them. For example, as a side note, here in this country, you guys invented the idea of free speech. You brought it to the world. You guys do not have free speech in this country anymore. 30 people a day are arrested in the UK for inflammatory social media posts.
What?
Someone by the name of Lucy Connolly is currently facing prison time for a Facebook post that was critical of migrants. It is normal, unfortunately, for civilizations to get away from how they once operated and how they once were. Now, to your question, does that answer the first part of your question? You were saying, why do they get away from monogamy? I want to make sure I'm answering your question.
I would say I don't feel that that's a full answer.
Okay, so you're asking why do they get away from what works? Is that correct?
Yes. Well, why do societies make this change once they become more prosperous?
Oh yeah, okay. I mean, because prosperity leads to degeneracy, for sure. That would be the answer.
Hold on. Prosperity leads to degeneracy? So why would Charlie Kirk ever argue for a more prosperous America if that would mean a more degenerate America under his logic? What? That's it. This is literally the incel adage of like hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. What? It's ridiculous.
So once you are prosperous, you tend to no longer have the moral guardrails or the limitations. Let's just say you no longer have delayed gratification because you have instant gratification because you have a surplus of goods, and then you have a decline of a transcendent moral order. The second part of the question, can you remind me, please, what the second question was? About markets?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, for example, I believe in intervention in markets if there is something that is improper morally. So, for example, I do not believe that you should be able to scam your neighbor or have misleading advertising because I believe in a transcendent moral standard, and the same goes for my personal views on marriage.
Okay, so I think we largely agree on the foundation. I would like to propose something that you might like to think about. So, firstly, I absolutely acknowledge that, again, if everyone in society was able to maintain healthy long-term pair bonds, that would be best. Again, there's strong data showing that independent of socioeconomic factors, broken homes are some of the strongest predictors of poor life outcomes.
We totally agree.
Yes. And even, I'm not sure if many people here are aware of this, but if you track, as countries become more socially egalitarian, somewhat surprisingly, rates of female depression and anxiety also spike disproportionately. So I think one of the problems here is that when you try and impose moral absolutism, inevitably, again, due to variance in attachment issues, due to industrialized culture, absent parents, screens, raising kids, around 50% of adults in the West develop attachment disorders, which make it very difficult to maintain long-term pair bonds. And then additionally, you have things like variation in oxytocin receptors, in density, in shape, also in vasopressin. There are going to be, even if there's 5% of people who feel that these rules really do not fit them, they will push back. And this will create ideologies that then grow into more wider appealing ideologies, which then, leads to this change. I think this is what happened in the sexual revolution. It started with a push for female autonomy. And then it was almost morphed into a really exaggerated expression of pushing for maximizing individual freedom. And I think that when you try and impose moral absolutism this way, it just inevitably causes pushback. And I think if you were to, as someone with a platform, instead say, hey, monogamy is great, it works best for most people, but I also understand there are some people it doesn't work so well for, more people would hear the message that you want to push.
Okay, thank you for that. That's an interesting, I've actually never gotten that question before. It's very thoughtful. Would you say you're against moral absolutism then?
Yes, I would.
Are you against that absolutely?
No, I'm very open to having my mind changed. And
so it's not an absolute thing?
Well, I'm against moral absolutism.
Are you against moral absolutism? Absolutely.
No.
Okay, so then you're consistent. So
I think
it's all just kind of. It's preference, not. It's about preference, and you could just basically do whatever you prefer. There is no transcendent moral order.
Well, I think what you're doing, though, is slightly unfairly putting me into a loop, because I'm very open to having my mind changed.
No, that's fine. What I'm saying, though, is that by definitionally, and this is something that will keep on coming back, you must choose what moral standard we live by. I'm very clear as to what moral standard. The lie of the West, of modernity, the last 30 years, is that we're going to have you live and let live, and there will be no moral standard. That itself is a moral standard, and it's a really bad one. And to your point, that yes, it creates more suffering, it creates more despair. And no, I disagree with what you say, and I respect the heart of which you're saying it. I will say that I have a moral obligation not to accommodate when people fall short, but instead try to lift them up towards the standard that is true and that I know that works.
So where I'd push this is I'd ask you, you describe people falling short when they fail to engage in long-term monogamy. What do you think causes that? Why do you think some people struggle?
Many reasons. Economic is one of them, but the biggest is the death of religion and the death of Christianity in the West.
Oh, yeah.
As America, I'll just talk about America. The UK is unfortunately far less churched than America, but as America has become less churched, so many of these social ills rise.
So one thing I'd say, I study the evolution of behavior, in particular sexual romantic behavior. If you track all the different hunter-gatherer cultures that we can study, and we track how agriculture shapes things, you see that ecological conditions really reliably predict the prevalence of monogamy, certain marriage systems. And what I think is what we refer to as attachment issues. They seem to be an ecological calibration to an environment. In environments that are more unstable, it's less optimal for an individual to grow up with a tendency to rely on long-term pair bonds. And I think there's a mismatch with the modern world, again, coming back to industrialization. There are so many people who raise kids as absent parents. Daycare is massively linked to attachment issues. This then causes people to struggle to bond long-term. And then again, coming back to the genetic part, there's again real research showing that especially vasopressin mutations and oxytocin mutations, some people really just do not have the proclivity for this.
What brings stability? Because you say stability is a good thing, and what would bring stability?
So first of all, I would say we had what you might consider stability in the previous century, and then it became unstable. And then things...
Why?
I'm saying because moral absolutism was imposed.
Moral absolutism was lost. You see, modernity rose. We started to teach our kids moral relativism, and we got rid of moral absolutes. So it's the opposite.
So why was it lost? Was it lost because people stopped pushing from top down?
Start bringing this question to a close.
Why was it lost? That's a question for far smarter minds. I can only tell you that it was. In America, it's honestly one of the worst decisions, not just worst ideas ever, which is modern feminism, largely from Betty Friedan's feminist mystique, which acted as if every woman who's in a monogamous marriage in the States is in some sort of tyrannical environment. And it has led to the women of the West being the most miserable, most depressed, most suicidal, most prescription drug-addicted cohort on the planet. And I think we need to appropriately challenge feminism and tell young women that it's okay, in fact, it's courageous to get married and have children again. I think it would solve a lot of our problems.
Well, I've been told to...
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's ridiculous. I'm sorry. First off, he's never read The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan. He spark notes it, or someone who's sympathetic to his persuasion told him the parts that he can get mad about. The Feminine Mystique did not say that every single woman who was in a monogamous relationship is somehow in some sort of like slavery, hierarchical dominated thing. Many of them were. I actually read this for one of my high school English class at one point. What the book says, basically, is that there's this thing with the problem with no name is what they called it. And it was why were so many women who were in these types of traditional relationships, who were homemakers, why were they so miserable? And it's because they were relegated to that and could not explore outside of that, because they were so trapped. Now, does that claim that every single woman who's in that type of relationship is miserable? No, but it does mean that that type of that type of lifestyle is not suited for everyone, and people would be better off outside of that. Once again, he cites all of these things about why society is going downhill. It's the classic thing with anti-feminists is they just say, look at all the problems in the world. Women have gained more rights, therefore women problem. No, what? What are you talking about? Murder rates go up in the summer. So does ice cream consumption. Therefore, ice cream consumption causes murder. No, that's just not how this works. I'm sorry. It's just not how reasoning works. Women getting more rights is not why there's less money, okay? Like, I'm sorry, that's not how it works. The women are not stealing the money. It's the rich billionaires. Like, it's so exhausting to listen to these people just who have no idea how any of these things work. Just blame everything on feminism. It's such a fucking cop-out. It's so ridiculous.
Our next question is from Tilly Middlehurst at Fitzwilliam College.
I've seen a lot of from these clips. She kills it.
So I'm a feminist. My question is about the role of women, though. What should women's role in public and private life look like, and what are the material benefits of that?
Well, thank you for that. Can I take it? I don't even want to take this detour, but can we both agree on what a woman is?
Yes. An adult human female is a biological state of being that is also socially experienced. Can I please elucidate just one example of that social experience?
Yeah, I was going to answer your question, but sure, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So let's say you're a member of a tribe, and that in that tribe, you have the biological female anatomy, and in order to become a woman in that tribe, you have to also get a tattoo. That's a social experience that's mapped onto biological reality.
So can a woman have a prostate?
Can a woman have a prostate? Biologically speaking, a woman is an adult human female that has a biological reality, but it's also social experience, right? So I don't...
Yeah, it's super easy. Like, can a woman have a prostate?
So as per my definition of woman, I would say that people who have a prostate are biologically male, but they can sometimes be socially treated as women.
Okay, got it. So women can have prostates. Got it. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So you're a feminist that actually isn't just fighting for women, you're also fighting for men.
Yeah.
So, yes,
Yeah.
men also experience harms from patriarchy,
Yeah.
but I argue...
We're talking about the same feminism, though, just make sure.
That is feminism. Charlie just doesn't fucking understand that feminists fight for men and women. This is the thing. This is the whole picture that they've been given. I don't know if Charlie Kirk is genuinely just so fucking dumb that he doesn't understand that feminism also fights for the well-being of men by breaking down things like toxic masculinity and the patriarchy. He does. Or if Charlie's just parroting this because that's what he does. He wants his audience to have this view of feminism as this man-hating ideology. But it's fucking insane.
Sure, go ahead.
So men also experience harm from patriarchal domination, but I would argue that those harms come from that system of domination itself. In the same way, for example, this isn't a threat, but if I reached across and punched you in the face, then my hand might hurt, right? So are we understanding that there are patterns of power? So I would also fight for the rights of men as a feminist, just as I would fight for the rights of women.
Sure. Do you think women are happier than they were 40 years ago?
I think I would have a few responses to that. I think that women report more stress and dissatisfaction today because not because they have more rights or because of feminism, but because they're under dual pressure to both excel professionally and also because of the domestic labor in homes that is structured around outdated expectations. So, for example, studies like the OECD's Better Life Index show that women's life expectancy, education levels, professional achievements have risen in countries with higher gender inequality. So I would argue that what you're calling unhappiness is actually visibility, because now we hear women expressing dissatisfaction, whereas in the 50s, we prescribed them Valium and we lobotomized.
Yeah, good shit.
That's really rich. I didn't know women not to complain 50 years ago. That's funny. So,
We've always
no, hold on a second. Why are suicide rates going up more for women?
I think that
Forget
encourages...
complaining. Materially, women are killing themselves more. Why is that?
I think that even if...
It's also ridiculous to claim, yeah, they got the right to vote. Now they're killing themselves. No! Like, what world are we fucking living in? Like, genuinely. Like, how are you tying these two things together? Yeah, women would just be so much more happy if they were in the home, and therefore women shouldn't have more freedom, because if they have the freedom, they might kill themselves. Like, economic inequality, especially among young people, the rise of social media, expectations that are unrealistic set by the fashion industry, bullying of many sorts, many people who develop eating disorder. Like, there's so many different aspects to this, and Charlie's like trying to boil it down to like women unhappy, therefore because feminism. Like, it's just exhausting. It's so stupid. It's correlation causation.
both men and women have become unhappier. Men's suicide rates have risen as well, and that's also been exponential. Can you at least concede that feminism offers only one potential explanation? There could be also other explanations.
Of course, obviously, but feminism is the glaring thing in front of us, where we have fertility rates down, we have marriage rates down, we have unhappiness up. And we did something in the 1960s out of the universities of Brady Friedan and Gloria Steinem and all these feminists that basically said, you're trapped in a home, go get a job, freeze your eggs, take birth control. And all of a sudden, women are way unhappier than they were 40 years ago. And I just have to ask the question, why is that? Is it working? And maybe there are biological differences between men and women that we should respect. And that deep down, a lot of women want to get married and have children. In fact, we should applaud it and we should support it. And we should say, it means nothing if you're gonna go be a CEO of some shoe company or be some banker in London. What matters if you raise children and you have something to pass down.
Same thing for men?
Long after you're gone.
Same
I
thing.
think I would bring 2 points to that.
Same thing for men, though? Same thing for men, right? No, because there's biological differences between men and women that just fundamentally do not exist at any sort of relevance systematic level. All of these studies that are done between cognitive differences between men and women find very, very small differences. Nothing to the level of women good for babies in home and men go out and have a big job. Like, no, that's just not how it works. Also, and I've said this many times before, most women, and I would say most men, but most women want to have children. Most women, feminists included, want to have children. They just don't want to be defined as a baby maker. They don't want to be defined as that being their only role that they can have. So what we should do is we should give people more freedom and more economic stability so that they can make the choice to have kids. And they will. They fundamentally will. People want to reproduce. People want to have kids. It's just something that people innately want to do. So make it easier for them to do it. Don't force women into the home. That is it. We don't get more people by restricting people's freedom. It's that simple.
First one is just really simple, which is that you can ascribe liberalism all you want as the cause of the unhappiness. I would argue something else. I would say that it's certain economic policy that has very little to do with the social acceptance of alternative lifestyles. Correct. I would say that we can recognize that income inequality across a vast swathe of Western countries has increased, which causes all kinds of social ills, a lack of social cohesion, housing price growth doesn't correspond with wage growth, monopolies increasingly become kind of emboldened to interfere with politics, and monopolies don't prioritize social health either. I think that those offer more compelling reasons for a decline in happiness than an increase in freedoms. Because just one more thing, on an intuitive basis, generally speaking, people want more freedom, not less.
Okay, so if that's true, why is it? Do you agree that the happiest women in the West are married with kids?
I would have to look into it, but I think there are certain
and objectively we know that, right? The women with kids are not the ones tearing down statues, right?
Yeah, but why? Economic stability, right? You know what I mean? Like, I don't. What do you want to get at here? Yeah, if you're married with kids and you're able to like have a sustainable lifestyle, then of course you're going to be happier. Like what? Huh?
They're the ones that actually have obligations.
Does tearing down statues correspond to some kind of smiles per capita data set that I wasn't aware of?
Again, it's like, it's a little bit of a one-liner. The happy and the grateful. The happy and the grateful usually don't go burn down Wendy's in their spare time, of which we saw in our country all throughout a single summer. But as
yeah, happy people seldom make history because it's those who are dissatisfied who make change. Of course, if you're married with kids and you have no problems and you're of the upper echelons of society, yeah, you're not going to feel super dissatisfied. That's not surprising whatsoever at all. Like what? Huh?
Side note, you would agree, objectively, study after study, survey after survey, that the women of the West that are married and have children, especially a lot of children, are far happier than even the ones that earn more money correlated at the same age.
No, this is a terrible argument. For a lot of these reasons, these well-being studies are so flawed is because they don't use precise language. Some of them use happiness, some of them use well-being, and also the way that people self-report can be based on different metrics. So people can be deeply stressed, people can be unhappy in certain ways, but still check that their well-being is good because they have their basic necessities met or they're happy with the lifestyle that they have. You ever know the friend who's like constantly stressed about things? You know, oh my God, I have to do this and I have to do this, but they're deeply content and fulfilled with having a lot of obligations. That's kind of gets overlooked because people might check a certain box that doesn't actually correspond. So these studies are terrible. Also, people are terrible at self-reporting. Like self-reporting is notoriously inaccurate in terms of getting people's accurate gauge of happiness. Also, there's a big problem within these studies that those who are unhappy are unlikely to actually respond to these studies. You know what I mean? Like people who are happy about their lives might want to tell you that they're happy. People who are unhappy might not want to advertise that they're unhappy about their lives. So there's a bit of a sampling and selection bias here within that sort of thing.
So I also don't think that happiness is a very good metric, and neither do you, because you think gay people shouldn't just pursue happiness by being gay. They have other moralistic considerations to be making. So I don't think smiles per capita is a particularly convincing way to measure whether or not we should encourage women to be autonomous. I think we should maximize agency within a fair system that has reasonable parameters because it's expedient, it's good for the economy, it's logical, it's the moral thing, because if we can't prove the material harms, we shouldn't discourage it. And also self-reported studies is a really flawed way to do psychology.
Thank
It's the week
you.
before my university exams
Thank
right
you.
now, and I'm standing here explaining the basic methodology behind survey collection in sociology, which you don't even think is a real subject, to Charlie Kirk. If I took one of those surveys right now, I'd check extremely miserable, but so would a Palestinian child who's been torn to smithereens. How are we going
You
to
would
measure
say extremely miserable?
No, I'm kind of making a joke.
No, I mean, but seriously, like, but hold on. I mean, like, that's an important point, though, is that the women in the West have it the best in the world. And yet they're way unhappier than women of sub-Saharan Africa. There's something fundamentally wrong here. Because the women of sub-Saharan Africa have something that a lot of women in the West do not have. The women in the West...
You know what a lot of women in sub-Saharan Africa don't have? Their clitoris. Frankly, that's the case. You know what I mean? Like, female genital mutilation is super common there in certain places. I'm not saying all. I'm not saying this is like a cultural, like, direct thing that should be ascribed to a group of people. But that is something that is practiced. And they treat women horribly in some of those places. However, some of them check that they're happy because they don't know anything better. They don't know a better future. If you ask a bunch of women in the Taliban, or like under Taliban rule, if they're happy, I mean, there's various problems methodologically which getting accurate data, because of course I doubt people are going to want to say that they are unhappy. How are you going to survey, women who are under Taliban rule and get like accurate information out of them? I doubt you'd want to say you're unhappy, in that type of scenario, because you never know what's going to happen. But still, it's a really bad metric, because if, like she said, I don't know.
Have cats, and they have good jobs, and the women of sub-Saharan Africa, they have a belief in the divine, and they have kids. And maybe there's a biological undercurrent that is keeping a lot of women from realizing their full potential. And so without reading your phone and just connecting...
I'm not really reading my phone.
Well, it's fine. Sure, then you can answer without it. Fair enough. Would you agree that it's a good thing that more women get married and have children in the West?
I would ask you, would you say that a sub-Saharan African woman who's experienced female genital mutilation
There we go.
and checks
Thank you.
extremely happy in a survey, and I also would check extremely happy in a survey, who do you think would be objectively more happy, even if they both check the same answer?
No, again, so I fully, if you want to talk about how Islam mistreats women, we could talk all day long. Like, I'm all for that.
Me too.
How did we get to Islam? We're talking about Northern Africa, or we're talking about Africa. Islam is not primarily in Africa. What? Huh? Insane topic shift, mind you. Just like Charlie just immediately, well, we'll blame Islam. Like, good lord.
Okay, good. So we agree.
Absolutely,
We actually have
agree on
agreement.
many things.
And we should shut off Muslim immigration to the UK,
Yeah,
right? We
nice
totally agree.
one.
I think that all religious fundamentalism is bad, and if you take that logic, we should also not allow evangelical Christians into
Well, okay,
the UK either.
hold on. So
There
hold on
we
a
go.
second. Hold on. That's funny. Hold on. Can you show me a single... Show me, what would your example, because I have 50, of a single Christian country that you would say mistreats women, right?
America.
America.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yes.
We had a female woman vice president.
Fucking terrible
Female
argument.
Vice president, a female speaker of the House.
Oh my
Women
god.
earn more than men
Wow.
in America.
What?
In
No.
Rwanda, female representation in government.
Hold on. No. We can't overlook that for a second. What the fuck? Hold on. I want to go back for the clip. Thank you, because I'm going to edit this. What the fuck? Huh? No. It's ridiculous to say that just because, oh my god, racism is done because we had Obama. Charlie, are you fucking serious? Yeah, women actually don't have it that bad, even though they literally do not have bodily autonomy and reproductive autonomy, because we had one female vice president who wasn't elected president, and we also had one female speaker of the House, and we've had like 4 or 5 women Supreme Court justices out of over 100 men. Women make up less than a quarter of Congress. Like, what? Huh? In what world? Like, that's the worst argument ever. It's laughably bad.
The House, women earn more than men in America.
No, they don't.
In
Based
Rwanda,
on
female
what?
representation in government supersedes the UK by quite a lot. Do women get treated better in Rwanda?
Okay, I might be super off this. Like, is Rwanda Islamic? Like, I'm not totally sure. I don't think it is. Like, is it? Like, I don't know, actually. It's not. So, again, we were just talking about Islam. It's a little bit of a side note, but you must be morally clear, because you brought up female genital mutilation, which is a teaching of the Islamic faith. But as a side note, like, again,
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if about Islam, but I don't Is female genital mutilation a teaching of the Islamic faith? Let's do a little fact check here. We'll actually ask ChatGPT because that might give me a better answer. Is it not available right now? It's not giving me the little thing. Okay. We'll use it. Here we go. Is female genital mutilation part of Islam? Is practiced in some. It's not a requirement of Islam. It's condemned by scholars. Yeah. So of course Quran does not mention it. Violation. Yeah. No. Nope. What? So Charlie's just lying through his teeth, of course, because he hates Muslims. Like, what a shock. No surprise there.
Very important, which is I'm not here to require you to do anything or not. I'm making a simple observation, which is objectively true regardless. The women of the West are miserable, and they're miserable for a reason. Because we've told them to suppress how they are made by God and pursue something else and get a bunch of trinkets and get a bunch of promotions, and they end up at 38 years old with a big flat in London, and they're miserable. And we should tell them to stop freezing their eggs and start finding their partner earlier and have lots of babies.
Yeah, okay, I think I'd bring two just final points to this.
First, it's fucking ridiculous. Like, that's not the case. That's not the reason women are unhappy. Women are not unhappy because they don't have kids. It's not the case. You know what I mean? Like, men as well experience forms of unhappiness. It's not because they don't have children. You know what I mean? Charlie, he says, I'm going to say something objectively true. Goes on a whole fucking tangent where he says, like, nothing that's objectively true. No. But this is not how it works. I don't know. It's exhausting at this point to keep refuting the same points over and over and over.
One is just really intuitive, right? Which is that if you actually care about women's happiness, then the solution is to structurally support them. That means universal childcare, shared legally enforceable parental leave.
There you go.
And in Nordic countries where women have high workforce participation and also some state support, they report higher life satisfaction than in more conservative countries, including America. So if your metric is happiness,
just use satisfaction surveys. You just told me they're BS.
So are satisfaction surveys bullshit or not? Because you told me they're bullshit.
Do you acknowledge satisfaction surveys or not? You just told me that they're BS. Do you think they're objective? We can use that as data?
I don't think that
yes or no?
It is the only sole data set, but it is a data set that necessarily
you told me they're so
matters.
flawed and you self-report. Okay, by the macro self-satisfaction data, I am correct. And you are right. When you have paid family leave, you are happier. I'm actually a proponent of that. At Turning Point USA, we pay for 6 months when somebody has a child. I think there's a lot of agreement we can have on that.
Women?
We need to encourage having more children. I think the Hungarian child policy is phenomenal. We should look at that because the greatest thing that is plaguing the West is we're not having enough kids. And it's not just bad because we won't have a future. It's also bad because the present is awfully miserable for too many women as well.
Okay, in which case I think we get...
Do I start bringing this to a close, please?
Okay, I think just one final thing, which is that in which case we get to a really interesting argument about what parts of womanhood can be demarcated to the social and what kinds of womanhood can be demarcated to biological. So, for example, my anatomy is demarcated to the biological, but the fact that I might potentially be a better nurturer than a man, I would demarcate that to the social, you might demarcate that to the biological, in which case we have differing moral scales of value. I would ask why we should necessarily prioritize your moral scale of value, which prioritizes things like the birth rate, when in actual fact there are various other moral scales of value. And if you yourself are a free market American, why is it the case that you would not, like the previous speaker noted, extend personal freedoms towards all spheres, including a private sphere?
I believe in absolute truth claims, and it's absolutely wrong and bad when a society stops having kids to replace their own population. And then you have to import the third world and you become the third world. It's bad.
Jesus.
I disagree, but thank you.
Okay, thank you.
No, it's fucking ridiculous. Also, the reason we have declining birth rates is primarily economic. That's the case. Also, people have children when they're economically stable, and certain people don't have children because they don't have to, or they largely become more educated on those sorts of things. It is true that a lot of low-income people have a lot of kids. I mean, largely it's because access to proper contraception and that sort of thing is not there. There's lack of education in many ways, but I don't know. That's ridiculous. He's saying we become the third world because we have immigration. I mean, a lot of the immigrants we bring in, as we brought up before, contribute overwhelmingly positively to the United States economy. It's just the case that when we allow people into this country who are deeply, want to work, and we make them citizens, they contribute, and then they pay more taxes, and they contribute overwhelmingly positively to the country in ways that even the average citizen doesn't. They commit lower rates of crime. This is actually true. And they contribute on average like $5,000 for every immigrant we bring in. It's a $5,000 net benefit to the United States. They pay much more in taxes than they take out in terms of like social services and benefits. So Charlie's just incorrect in that idea that like immigration, oh my God, we're going to become the third world. Like, no, it's actually not the case. That was great. He's awesome. Love to see it.
Thank you. And the final question that we've got time for today is from Sammy McDonald from St. John's College.
Dude looks like Ron Weasley. What hair? That's great.
Good evening, Mr. Kirk. You've obviously devoted a lot of your life to electing, keeping in power Donald Trump, and you did so partly because you said Trump would put Americans first and take them out of foreign conflicts. Should we see how that is going at the moment? Currently, Trump has just accepted a $400 million debt from Qatar, which we're assured is perfectly above board. Billions in arms are going to Saudi Arabia, which they're using to bomb and starve Yemeni children. Not sure how that's in the interest of the United States, but it might be in the interest of the $5.5 billion deal his failed sons are receiving. At the same time, this great president of peace has greenlit mass killings not just in Yemen, but in Gaza, where he greenlit an invasion called Operation Gideon's Chariot with the express aim of wiping out the Gazan population. You promised to put America first. Haven't you and your ilk sold America out?
Both human. Yeah, there you go.
No.
Well, I'm glad you have great intellectual substance and can answer. Because it's all the culture wars for you, isn't it? The second someone actually tells you what you're doing, which is red.
Can you
and
calm down a little bit? Like, just a
Oh,
little bit.
wow. Oh.
Pounding the table, you're all over the place.
Oh, he's passionate.
No.
Wow.
You want me to go piece by piece? Or would you like me to talk slower?
Oh,
I think you
so
can-
Number one,
condescending.
Donald Trump is convening a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. Joe Biden gave them
that's
armaments.
going well, isn't it? It's going well.
Can you not interrupt me?
Going well.
I allowed you to talk uninterrupted.
You're famous for not interrupting.
Yeah, I haven't interrupted a single person here today. Can I
That's not
speak
true.
uninterrupted, actually? Okay. He is convening a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. I believe we will see an end to that war. Number
Yeah, with
two, he's
Russia
actually
winning the war.
talking to Iran and discouraging Israel to strike the interior of Iran and has stopped many other international countries to do the same. Number three, can you give him credit for ending the Indian-Pakistan war?
What do you
Both
mean?
of them said he didn't do that.
Well, hold on a second.
Let's go back.
No, that's important.
Russia, Ukraine.
Hold on, that's important.
Can I speak now?
Yes, but the Indian-Pakistan thing, you got to go deeper than that.
Gotta go deeper. Charlie doesn't know how to go deeper.
Is a peace summit where the main person in question, Russia, doesn't show up, is that a success, Mr. Kirk?
Well, I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure.
Not a success?
Well, again, these are ongoing negotiations,
Yeah,
and it's a
Putin
lot
didn't show
better
up.
than when your Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, went alongside our Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, to Istanbul and unnecessarily blew up a potential Russian peace deal, which has resulted in hundreds of thousands of dead Ukrainians, one of the great unnecessary wars of the modern era. Donald Trump
Why did
believes
it
in
start?
conversation and police through strength. He has been president for well over 120 to 130 days, and he has already ended a war between two nuclear conflicts of India-Pakistan.
What?
He has secured our own U.S. southern border while we were being invaded by foreign powers. And thirdly, he is brokering a potential settlement with Iran that will prevent a major escalation in the Middle East. And finally, it is very difficult, but I believe they'll get it done, that will finally see an end to the Russian-Ukrainian war.
I'm just going to disregard the enormous lies you just put out there about Russia and Ukraine. But do you really think leverage,
What lie did I-
negotiations work if you cut off all your leverage and scream at one party in the Oval Office? Don't you think that has just emboldened Russia? Because look at the approach. Putin thinks so much of your glorious president, he can't even be asked to show up. You have elected, or help elect, somebody who is at best an idiot and at worst is deeply corrupt.
Okay, again, so Trump and Putin had a 2-hour phone call today. You'll acknowledge that's a good thing. The pursuit of peace can sometimes be a winding road, and it's a lot better than sending hundreds of billions of dollars further into the killing fields of eastern Ukraine, something that tragically
Send
both the
weapons.
UK government and the US government has been unnecessarily...
Hold on, this is such a big piece of misinformation. I just have to correct it. We are not sending hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine. We are sending old military equipment that we don't use anymore. That is largely out of date because we are using better technology within our military, because that's what we choose to spend our money on, over there. It's weapons and aid largely. That's what we're sending over. We're not sending cash. Okay? That's not what we're doing. Also, a lot of that money in terms of weapons that we're sending over there, if it is not old weaponry, is spent here in the US to manufacture more weapons. So it's at the same time stimulating the US economy and going to American business. So it's just stupid.
Supporting for a couple of years. President Trump wants to see a brokerage, an ending of this settlement. I pray we can get it. It's very complicated because of the mess that Joe Biden left, which was an active kinetic war with a nuclear power sending American-made missiles into the interior of Russia. So President Trump has already ended a war. He's ended an invasion. He's only 130 days into this. And I believe, we do not know. At this point, we are merely speculating, which I think we should not spend our time doing that, because eventually one of us will be right. I believe we'll be right, and I believe we'll see an end to this war.
Can we just talk about 100 billion's worth of weapons? Because you dodged my question on what was going on in the Middle East, where Trump has just signed enormous arms contracts with Saudi Arabia and with Qatar. And I noticed you ignored the fact that this might have had anything to do with the blatant corruption going on through the Trump coin and going on through giving the very competent sons of Donald Trump billions of investment from Saudi Arabia and Qatar. This is something that is directly embroiling Americans into conflict, but is importantly killing many innocent people. Those nations have been known to terrorize innocent civilian populations. So if you're coming to me and you're objecting to America selling weaponry, why are you defending shilling for the Saudis?
Well, hold on. One is sending weaponry, one is purchasing. Secondly, you do know that the biggest purchase that was announced was commercial airliners, 737, $100 billion. You've heard of Qatar Airways. They purchased $100 billion of commercial airways. You are right, there were some weapons contracts. But I guess the question is, would you rather have Saudi Arabia buy weapons from America or China?
I'd rather they not have American weaponry at cut price rates.
See, I disagree.
Let's talk about Qatar for a second.
Okay, fine.
Because you mentioned Qatar. You've been talking a lot about Hamas and the evils of Hamas. Can I ask you, who's the main funder of Hamas?
Well, the Palestine. Well, the West actually funds Hamas.
Which state?
Well, Iran funds.
No. Where are the Hamas leaders?
Well, and also Qatar funds Hamas. It is a combination of international relief organizations.
Is this a state we should have a $400 million jet with the President of the United States on it?
Hold on. First of all, it was not given to him personally. I understand the optics of it, but it was not given to him personally. It was given to the U.S. government. And under that standard, no U.S. government should ever receive any gifts from any foreign countries whatsoever. It's not given to him personally, and not a violation of the.
Why is he trying to transfer it to his personal library?
Actually, okay. Again, he sent out a statement. This is way too in the weeds. If you want to keep on going it, we can.
It's not in the weeds. It's a fundamental moral principle.
Okay, so under that fundamental moral principle, then, can you acknowledge, though, that President Trump is getting more done in a less period of time than any president we've seen, while our prior president did not even know what year he got elected? You understand the contrast here?
What aboutism again? I'm not a defender of Biden.
No, I'm not saying President Trump is far better than the predecessor.
You have to defend the person you spent millions to
I will defend every day of someone who ends an invasion.
That's all you do, is
brings down the price of oil, who is revitalizing the American economy, who's brokering peace, who stopped the potential nuclear war,
anything
who is
good,
bringing Iran to the table.
Anything fucking good that happens under a Trump presidency, we credit to Trump. But anything bad, it's so complicated. There's so many different factors, playing in. But Trump gets all the credit, but none of the blame. These people are exhausting. It's stupid.
And bringing Russia to the table, someone who does not want armed conflicts with the greatest powers of our time, I will defend that endlessly.
Well, living
what are you defending?
in a fantasy world of your own creation. So it's quite hard to engage with.
But then disprove it.
But let's check on how Trump is doing in terms of diplomacy. Look, with the war in the Middle East, do you think it was a defensible decision to tell the Israelis you wanted Trump Gaza to agree for Israel to invade the Gaza Strip and to continue to murder thousands of innocent children and civilians in a pointless war? Is that in America's interest? Is that in humanity's interest?
Well, first of all, you should know something about Trump. There's something, if you realize with Trump over the last 10 years, he is quite the social media user and uses hyperbolic language at times.
Sure.
But let me ask you, in the conflict of Israel versus Hamas, who's the good guy?
I believe both Hamas and the Israeli government are evil. But I think also that there is no justification.
Are they equally?
There is no justification for the murder and mutilation of thousands of innocent people and children in a futile.
Let's zero in on it.
Bro is tweaking. Bro is doing a little jump.
For bombing innocent populations and dragging out a war which is damaging Israel and the West's security.
You've made that point, but
well, it's not a point; it's a moral truth, isn't it?
Yeah. It was also a moral truth that the war started because 1,300 Jews were killed and 200 were taken hostage.
No.
And when you declare war on Israel, expect a firestorm in reaction. Let me finish. I let you talk. Israel had its holiest day of the calendar year besides Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, Samat Torah, the 50-year anniversary of the Six-Day War. On Shabbat, Hamas invaded Israel, deciding to go recklessly to music concerts, to homes, to kibbutzes, and taking 200 plus hostages. They knew what they were doing. In one of the most cloistered urban environments on the planet, 2 million people live in a place where it's impossible to wage war. Impossible. Where they wear civilian clothing, they violate every tenet of the Geneva Convention, and the IDF, when they do something right, they get no credit. When they do life-saving surgeries of a Gazan child, they get no credit. When they drop leaflets, they get no credit. But when they happen to bomb a place where they are operating their military from, which we now know from third-party verified sources, hundreds of Hamas military operations are in mosques, schools, and hospitals. I'm sorry, the country where they were living in relative peace on October 6th, all of a sudden we had a war, and Hamas started the war. And I don't see people that were really upset about the 2 million.
Okay, no, there's so much misinformation you have to correct. The war did not start on October 7th. To say that is completely ignorant and totally flawed. Israel has been bombing the fuck out of the Gaza Strip for, like, eternity, basically. It has been in conflict going back more and more and more, like many, many, many years. To arbitrarily say that it started on October 7th is absolutely ridiculous. What else there? This whole human shields argument, it's exhausting, stupid. Let's say that someone, I don't know, for an example, let's say that someone committed a mass shooting or like a mass bombing and then they went and hid in an apartment complex just somewhere, like in Chicago. Let's say that happened in Chicago. Is the solution to level the fucking apartment complex with every single person who's in there? No. No, you don't. I don't really know what to say about that. Like, I agree with Hamas is bad. Hamas wants more civilian casualties because it radicalizes more people into their organization. But like, this is a terrible argument. Like, it's just there was not peace on October 6th. There was only peace because you don't care about dead Gazan children, which were happening even before then, and it has ramped up since October 7th. So I don't even know where to start with that type of thing.
Germans that were killed in World War II, civilians. A tragic truth of war is that civilians die. I don't like it, and you don't like it. And they brought it upon themselves. The only operation and entity to blame is the...
I'm sorry, the children who are dying brought it upon themselves? What the fuck? This is what I say when these people are genuinely evil. Like, they genuinely are evil. You know what I mean? To have the gall to say that children, babies, infants, brought it upon themselves to be bombed. They just don't view these people as human beings. They don't view them as people. They do not view brown people as people. Fundamentally the case.
Leadership of Hamas, not the Israeli government, for fighting this defensive war after they were invaded.
Yeah, okay.
I'm no defender of the terrible pogrom that was launched against Jews on that day. But the justification for the death of innocents cannot be an infinite cycle of bloodlust. It cannot be killing tens of thousands of innocent civilians with a war with no end in sight, people who are not complicit in those atrocities. It cannot be bombing hospitals which children use. It cannot be bombing hospitals in which cancer patients are dying and starving in there. The deaths that have been inflicted, nobody knows the true toll, but somewhere between 50 and 100,000 people lie dead under the rubble. And what is left for Gaza except for to continue to suffer under Hamas? Because it turns out Netanyahu's political strategy has not worked. It has entrenched Hamas within the territories. To be a Christian, I would have thought, Mr. Kirk, would never have involved suggesting that the price for an atrocity must be an infinite cycle of bloodlust, that innocent people and the young population must be killed to avenge some kind of providential quest. How can you call yourself a Christian? Well, you just did.
I want to make sure we get our moral clarity straight before we proceed. No one likes what's happening in Gaza. No one with a heart or a soul or a mind likes when kids die. But you must understand who started the conflict so that you could end it correctly. And until Hamas brokers an unconditional surrender, of which they are unwilling to do, they could release the hostages and drop their weapons and their lives would be spared. Instead, they are using children of Gaza as cannon fodder, financed by the Iranian mullahs and dragging the entire world into this conflict. So I don't even know what we're debating at this point other than I believe that Israel, I believe the facts, Israel was unconditionally attacked on October 7th. They're responding in kind. And I would just ask you a very simple moral question. How should Israel have responded?
Not with the blanket carpet bombing of the city, not with bombing hospitals. Of course, some kind of military operation might have been necessary, but not murder on this scale. There is no justification for what is happening with the enormous death toll that is being produced. I really cannot see how you come here and you have the gall to lecture us on Christian morality and then sit here and justify the murder of thousands of civilians. And is it working, Mr. Kirk? Is Hamas dismantled?
I've never said that.
You just did.
Well, no,
this is your whole
in
thing.
war, these are called casualties of a war.
We're going to need to start bringing this
Again,
to close.
I'm not going to justify every military maneuver of a 100,000 person army. Instead, what I will do is I'll be clear that there is a good guy and there is a bad guy. I honestly...
Isn't that the morality of a child?
Well, hold on.
It is. It's binary thinking.
It's interesting you say that.
It fundamentally is binary thinking to suggest that there's one good guy and one bad guy, and the world is divided into good and evil people. The correct is that it's not. Of course it's complicated. I'm not saying it's not complicated, but there can definitely be an overriding harm being done. And if it is a disproportionate amount of death and suffering that is being done with no end in sight, mind you, and that what happened before October 7th, you only care when white people or European people die, not when children die who don't share your skin color.
Because a child who knows that Israel is the good guy, Hamas is bad, has a lot more wisdom than a student like yourself at Cambridge University.
Yeah.
I will be glad that I will not have been somebody who has defended the genocide of the Palestinian people. And I think you will have to reckon one day that you have reckoned with...
Interesting. I want to close on this. So can you tell me what African country is currently ongoing a civil war?
Believe it or not, I know about Sudan because I'm not an idiot.
How about what Southeast Asian country has an ethnic cleansing going on right now?
Myanmar.
Good. And you have strong opinions on both sides?
Unlike you, I take an effort to be informed about foreign policy and to come to conclusions. You are a culture warrior. I believe when everything is done, Mr. Kirk, people will see you and the people you supported as corrupt, as selling the country out to the lowest bidder, and of doing irreparable damage to a country I'm sure we all deep down love.
The difference,
I think you will have to reckon with that.
Difference
Mr. Kirk.
is when...
Good for him. Yeah. Sorry, I don't have much to add here. It's kind of just interesting to listen to them, frankly. Bro looks so defeated.
The difference is when we get our way, we'll still have a country, and your country will be a third world hellhole. Next question.
Wow.
Thank you. That's all we've got time for today. Mr. Kirk has another engagement, so we're going to walk out of the chamber.
Questions with the students or no? I'm fine with it if you want. I don't care.
No, I think this is all we've got time for today.
You guys are easy.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we'll take a couple more. Does anyone have any questions?
Who's the best?
Wow, look at that.
Over there.
Oh, here we go. Charlie Kirk debating a professor. Be a good one.
Marvelous. Thank you. A very, very short question. Israel versus Hamas. Good guy versus bad guy. Russia versus Ukraine. Who's the good guy and who's the bad guy?
Both are bad, one is worse.
Which way round?
Russia is worse than Ukraine.
Okay, so why haven't we pursued that?
What do you mean?
Well, it seems to me that in the whole of the current US proposition, that Ukraine is being the bad guy.
In what way? We funded Ukraine upwards to $200 billion.
Absolutely, but...
We just signed a mineral deal with Ukraine, not Russia.
Yeah, but you are expecting Ukraine to give up 20% of its territory to someone who invaded it.
Well, is Crimea part of Russia or Ukraine?
Ukraine.
That's where we don't agree.
Well, I'm afraid that's part of international treaty. That's not up for grabs.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, that's hold on. I mean...
Oh, they annexed Crimea. They took it over in 2014.
Even Zelensky has said he's willing to give up Ukraine.
No. America signed the agreement that gave Ukraine Crimea.
Right.
When the Soviet Union ended.
Right. It was done. First of all, it never should have been done. It was largely ceremonial. But however, it was annexed under Obama. Yes, and it was a mistake. And it should be given back to Russia as a sign of good gesture to end this conflict. But who's currently controlling Crimea? Where was the Russian Navy headquartered in World War II? Where was the end of World War II? This is very important.
I'm not doubting that. I'm just saying that if we're being logical on what has happened, that you are now arguing against that flow. And I don't understand it. Because actually, why is Ukraine the bad guy?
No, I said they're bad. They're not the bad guy.
Yeah, well, you said they were both bad, but one was more bad.
Correct, yes.
So why is Ukraine bad?
Well, there's a lot wrong with Ukraine. First of all, they're not a democracy. Zelensky refuses to hold an election.
Well, no, he can't hold an election.
Oh, wait, did Churchill hold an election during the war?
Because under his constitution...
Hold on, Lincoln held an election during the war. That's not true. He can call an election. He can call a snap election. He's full dictator of the country.
No.
Because he knows that the people of Ukraine would kick him out immediately because he's deeply unpopular. In fact, if he wanted to show a statement to the world, he would call an election and win by 80% and say, see, I'm super popular. So that's number one. I have a problem with that. I have a problem with a person being propped up as a government we're sending $200 billion to that refuses even to face his voters.
Where are the voters, though? Think about that. People who are fighting for the country. A lot of them are either fighting or dead. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying there shouldn't be an election that's held, and perhaps suspending elections in times of war, shaky, because that's exactly when, a lot of decisions are being made. So, like, you can definitely criticize them for that. I do think there is some provision in the Ukrainian constitution, though, that does say that, like, during specific times of war, elections aren't to be held until peacetime. I believe I read that somewhere, but I'm not super confident on the specifics. So, in that case, he's kind of just following that constitution that was already written by people who weren't him. So, you can blame him all you want. I guess he could go against that. I don't know if he could call a snap election. I don't know enough about Ukrainian law and things like that, so...
I can't agree with you factually on that at all.
Okay.
I mean, constitutionally, Ukraine is not able to hold an election because it's under military law at the moment, and that's just a matter of fact.
Again, he can, as a prime minister or president, he could do whatever he wants.
He can't.
That's not.
All right, we're going to just go back and
an executive order.
What are you talking about? This is the problem with these people. He's like, as prime minister or president, he could do whatever he wants. That's what he thinks Trump can do, because he doesn't think these people are constrained by anything. He thinks they're gods. He's saying that Zelensky is a dictator because he won't hold elections, but Zelensky should be a dictator and override the Ukrainian constitution to hold an election during wartime. It's ridiculous. It's because these people think that leaders should be dictators. It's because they are authoritarian sympathizers, fetishists, if you will. They love the idea of a strong man. That's why they love Trump. It's so pathetic.
And change their constitution.
Okay.
Neither can the American president either. So
okay.
There's a bit of
he could even do a ceremonial election to see where he actually stands with the people.
I think we call those opinion polls.
Yes, and they're very negative.
Firmly ahead in the opinion.
Again, but you would agree that a person that holds on to power without the election of the sovereign is pretty questionable.
Well, he was elected.
No, not in those circumstances.
Okay, then we disagree.
No, okay, that's fine. That's fine. But give me another reason why you...
They are the most corrupt country in Europe that never even met the most remote standards of joining NATO. Do you not know where a lot of this money is going?
I don't disagree that there is a problem with corruption, but the most corrupt country in Europe, are you sure about that?
I'd have to think, I'd have to double or triple think about that, but they're very corrupt.
Okay.
What the fuck? Charlie Kirk makes bold claim, actually has no idea what he's talking about. When challenged, I might have to double or triple think. Then why would you make... This is the proof that he just makes strong claims with no knowledge behind it whatsoever at all. He just lies through his teeth and hopes that he gets away with it.
I mean, so that's a little bit doubtful. It's not absolute.
Well, I mean,
there's plenty of corruption around. I mean, let's face it, we are talking about comparison with some of the states you're doing business with in the Gulf.
Oh, of course, but we're not giving them money, they're giving us money. That's a difference, right? Saudi Arabia is...
Oh, so it's fine.
Well, hold on a second.
It's morally acceptable to take money from corrupt people.
Well, hold on. First of all, as far as morally acceptable, you do what's best in the benefit of your country.
There you go.
So For example, we were allied with Russia during the Second World War, and I'm glad we were. And I would ask you,
don't forget,
how much money is too much money to send to Ukraine? We're at $200 billion right now.
Not sending money. We're not fucking sending money. A majority of it isn't money. It's weapons and aid. Weapons that are either completely decommissioned because we don't use them anymore because they're outdated, and we send old weaponry that we would otherwise have to break down here and spend money doing that, and we're sending them aid. We're sending them, I believe, like food and things of that nature that are manufactured here in the United States. So almost all the money that we're sending them is not cash. We're not flying cash out and dropping it out the window. We're giving them aid that is largely made in America that stimulates our economy and stimulates our GDP. So, like, it's ridiculous.
Send any more money to Ukraine.
We agree.
I think you have to agree to support them as a free country and perhaps sell them weapons, like you're very happy to sell weapons to less free countries. And I think Europe will pick up the slack, as we ought to. And I don't disagree with some of the comments about Europe not looking after its own security. I just don't get this approach, which was supposedly to end the war quickly, which now seems to be elongating it. And in doing so, throwing up a smokescreen of very variable facts, if they are facts at all, about how things occurred, which actually isn't helping things. And if people can't see that Putin is stalling, I'm just...
I agree with you. I think he might be stalling.
And therefore, and I think even your president has acknowledged the fact that he thinks he might be stalling.
That's correct. So we don't have a disagreement there.
No, we don't. No,
we just have a disagreement about the efficacy of tactics, and we don't know. And I'm willing to say we could be wrong.
No. Oh, well,
of course you could be wrong in life.
Yeah.
I mean,
we could all be wrong. But actually bringing that war to an end consistently actually isn't going very well. And I would just suggest to you that whatever tactics have been used are perhaps not the best. And they are certainly inconsistent with what's going on in the Middle East and how America has been treating parties in the Middle East. But I've had enough of your time.
Fair. No, that's a fair contention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
All right, is that it? There you go.
Everyone please stay in their seats, please, while we walk out. Thank you.
All right. What a video. All right. Give us a quick pause. Well, I guess I'll drag myself up for a very quick debrief, though. I'm kind of exhausted. All right, how'd long that go? 3 hours, 5 minutes. Not terrible. Not terrible at all. Whew, well, that was something. Yeah, interesting for sure. I think more conversation about these things is better than less. I think there's a lot of people who are saying, like, why would you platform Charlie Kirk? Don't platform Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk already has a platform. He already has people listening to him. He was the 5th most watched stream on election night. You know what I mean? Like, people already listen to this guy. So it's not like by, like, just completely shutting him out, we're going to somehow, like, make him irrelevant. He's already relevant, and he's going to keep spewing his stuff whether or not we're pushing back. So might as well push back in those areas. So I don't know. I think it was interesting. I think the students did a great job. Especially going up against someone like Kirk, who is trained at changing the subject, making things out to be like they're not. That's difficult. It's difficult to do, and I think they all did a really good job in pushing back against that. So I hope they do more of these. I'll be excited to see what a lot of these students do next. I'm excited to see that some of them have already, started a social media career is the right thing, but, are branching off of that. I think what's her name, Tilly, she seems awesome. I hope she continues up with that, because I thought she did a really good job. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. I think it's really cool, especially, it was just a tangent I had, but it was something I thought about. I think it's really cool how she embraced the American flag. You know what I mean? I think within the left, there's kind of, and America's done a lot of bad, for sure, and I'm not, like, saying that they haven't, but I think embracing patriotism is something that the left needs to do. You know what I mean? Like, I want to fight for a better America. I think dissent is patriotic. I think calling us out when we fall short, especially for our people, is patriotic. And I love this country. I love America. You know what I mean? That's why I don't want to see it fall into an authoritarian fascist state. Like, that is why. It's because I love this country. So I think, saying we hate America doesn't really help anything. You know what I mean? It's a pessimistic attitude that won't lead to any change, because it's just giving up. And I will never give up. I will never give up on this country because I care about the people in this country, and I care about Americans, and I care about doing better for everyone. So in that sense, you know, I embrace patriotism. That's all I would say. You know, there's a difference between patriotism and nationalism. You know, those are not the same thing. I'm not saying put America's interest above all else or, you know, exclude other people. That's not the same thing. But, you know, embracing the American flag, embracing that our country can do better. And the reason we're fighting for a better America is because we know it's possible and we know it's worth fighting for. So I guess, I don't know, in the spirit of that, maybe I'll kind of end it here. Of course, thank you so much for watching. If you stayed for the whole, what is that, like 3 hours and 8 minutes, at least here, but I know I had some technical issues, so when I edit this down, it might be a little bit shorter, but it's been a long one, but I think it's definitely been a good one. I also plan to react at some point to the Jordan Peterson surrounded episode that has been out on Jubilee for a while now. That was something for sure. Okay, that was, wow. Okay, that was quite the thing. That won't be a blind react because I've already watched it because I had a few friends who were participated in it, but that's something. So thank you so much for watching. Definitely subscribe if you enjoyed this type of reaction video. Of course, leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I'm sure I won't have to tell you to do that. I'm sure some of you have already done that throughout watching this video, but yeah, I've been enjoyed making this reaction content, and that's kind of all I've got. So thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you on my other platforms as well, and you guys take care. Bye.